nice to meet you in person.
Yeah, I know. Do you think I have time to run to the restroom?
I think so. Yeah. Do you know what else you said? So when you come out here on the front, it's on the right-hand side before you get to the doors.
Okay, thank you.
Hello everyone. We're going to go ahead and kick it off. We want one more presenter to have an announcement this morning. Welcome to Cincinnati Traffic Break and navigating the University of Cincinnati. So I hope everyone found the garage is okay, and obviously you're here, so you figured out how to get the door. Thank you guys for coming today, for sure. So as I start to interpret that in a little bit too, we might pause for a minute if that's okay, so that we can do a quick interview. We might switch up the speaking engagement just a little bit. But I want to go ahead and kick it off by introducing myself. My name is Christina. I'm part of the Coalition for Responsible Development, as well as a member of President for Responsible Development as well. I hail from Mountain, Ohio, or actually Cincinnati, Ohio. And about 12 weeks ago, guys, I didn't know what a data center was. I knew what storage of medical records were. I obviously shopping cars, but I had no idea what was in front of me until my husband actually was diagnosed with cancer. And I was talking to a friend, and I said, backstory, my husband was involved for normal, which was, oh, hi, yeah, for sure. For sure. Sorry, guys. I am just a vegetarian. I'm not a public speaker, so I'm just a little nervous. But yes, about 12 weeks ago, my husband was diagnosed with cancer. We have him reported to the University of Cincinnati, who does a monitoring program for health, right? So individuals that are exposed to uranium or to heavy metals in level, that's $70 million lawsuit and a buyout, and such as a big medical monitoring company. So a friend of mine said, oh my gosh, you're going to have a heart attack, and we realized it was coming into our backyard. So less than 2 miles from my house, we have a 1,200 acre data center being proposed to be built. So they shared a video with how far Jessica is. Hey Jessica! They shared a video with me and Jessica and Jonathan and was going to put out. And it totally terrified me. And my joking comment is shame on me. Shame on me for not being involved. Shame on me for not talking to my representatives, going to council meetings. And it just opened up the Pandora's box. So for the last 4 weeks, I have just kind of invested myself into learning as much as I can, talking to individuals who are subject matter experts, such as these folks up here, representatives, as well as individuals running for governor, and just trying to get involved, do everything that I can to make educated decisions or help our communities as well. So I want to do a quick thank you though. The University of Cincinnati has been absolutely fantastic for this. Two individuals who I'd like to introduce. One is Amy Kate. Yes, she's my daughter. So she is going to be one of our seniors. Sarah and Austin, you're one. Sarah Austin. I'm horrible with pronunciation. So these two are the University of Cincinnati seniors. They're part of the C's, which is the University of Cincinnati's Environment and Sustainability College. They are putting on this presentation for you guys today, and I'd like to let some goals and highlight the presentation to make this a community-wide event. So thankful for the University of Cincinnati. Love the fact that we have two very young adults who are engaged, they are willing to communicate, they are educated and share their information, and thank you also to your professors. I don't know all of our professors, but Dr. Laura Zanobi, Dr. Terry Jacobs, and Dr. Bob Hyman. I heard nothing two guest representatives here today. One is Congressman Greg Lansman, thank you guys, as well as Casey Butch, am I saying that right? Okay. Lansman is our U.S. House Representative, and Casey is a Republican candidate running for governor. We also have our panel experts who graciously came in today. Tennessee, Wisconsin, Columbus, they picked up their Saturday afternoon to come speak with you, and we're very appreciative of that too. We have Prescott Bulch, if I'm saying that right too, who's a retired technology executive. He brings a wealth of information about data centers. Molly Greiner, who's our policy matters for Ohio. We have Ben Murray, who's our economist and senior researcher for Food and Water Watch. We have Nathan Alley, who's from the Sierra Club, Ohio. I have not seen Spencer yet. Oh, hey, Spencer. Welcome. Hello, Spencer. So he's from our Ohio Environmental Club. We also have Paul Lambert, who brings a great wealth of knowledge. He is a retired technology executive, former New York City school board member, and a former Norwich Township financial officer. He actually has been part of a city that has data centers and has voiced some concerns and has gone through this review already, so thank you for being here. And then last but not least, we have Jordan Hare, who's also a Democratic candidate who's running for the 47th District of Ohio and has graciously given her time today as well. So, topics that we are going to cover is what are data centers, environmental and health impacts, as well as what are the impacts on our local utility costs. That seems to be a hot topic debate, right? Impacts to our local economies, as well as transparency and governance issues. If you folks are like me, I found out about this, like I said, from a YouTube video that generated YouTube and Facebook video, and didn't even know like why our communities are engaging with NDAs. So the fact that we're meeting here today and sharing the information is huge because so far we really don't have a lot of information. And then last but not least, what our communities can do. So at the end, we can ask just kind of little questions. I'm sure you guys have a ton of questions. We have all the subject matter experts who are available to answer them. We will have a community session at the end or Q&A, and you can feel free to ask questions to any of our subject matter experts. And if you don't feel comfortable asking in a group, I know that we kind of have a hard stop finish at 4 because it's a long day. But please feel free to stick around after the fact as well. A couple of them might have to leave. But if you want to come up and ask questions without asking in a group too, please feel free to do that as well. So, Congressman, can I kick it off with you if you'd be so kind? So I'd like to introduce Congressman Greg Lansman. He has been instrumental for us for education and on the state and national level as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn over the mic and let them do that.
Well, thank you all for coming out on a Saturday to talk about data centers. Obviously, this is a huge issue for the country, for the state of Ohio, and I'll just talk about two bills. And I actually have a handout, so we'll pass that out. So just so you have the nuts and bolts of the two bills, this is something that I think requires not only state and local leadership, but national, federal legislation to protect our communities from these data centers. So these data centers are coming. They're going to be built all over the country, in large part because they have to be built here. They need to be built on the grid or near the grid. And the question I think becomes, well, who pays for it? And you've got on one hand these big tech companies that are worth billions and billions of dollars, and on the other hand, you've got our towns and our communities, some of which don't have much money at all, and then our communities and ratepayers that shouldn't have to pay anything more for these data centers. So the first bill, there's a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission called FERC. How many of you have heard of FERC? All right, great. FERC would be, and we tried to get them to do this on their own, but our first bill just says, look, you've got to take the leadership role on this as the regulatory body and study immediately the impacts, environmental and economic impacts of these data centers, so that everyone has a complete understanding of what we're talking about no damage data centers, and it would do three things. One is it would require any data center operating in the United States to pay every dime of the electricity that they use, every single dime. That ratepayers locally do not see any increase in their utility bills. That's the first thing. They got to pay the whole thing. Number two is no more NDAs, so that we have full transparency. Communities know what's going on, who's doing what. So if you're a public official, you can no longer, when this bill passes, sign an NDA, because that is in large part what's allowing these companies to come in, build these data centers, and do so below the radar, where people have no idea what's happening, whether it's good or bad, and they don't really say, which is undemocratic and hugely problematic. And then the third thing it does is it requires a complete environmental review of data centers. So it's more than just noise, but noise is a big piece of it. And then the part that I worry about, because it doesn't get as much attention, is what happens when these data centers leak. Who remediates that soil? Who remediates the water? The forever chemicals are the ones that we know could be problematic, right? The data centers require a ton of water, it's a lot of energy and heat, and so they use a derivative of what's called PFAS, which is what firefighters have in their on their clothes. It makes things less likely to catch on fire. That's not something you want in the water, right? So these are two, I think, really important pieces of legislation. Do no damage data centers would codify what you hear politicians say all over the place, which is, well, these big tech companies, they got to pay their own way, and our ratepayers have to be protected. But nowhere is that legislation. Nowhere is that required. And that's why our bill, the Do No Damage Data Centers, is so important, and hopefully we'll get bipartisan support, because people need protection now. Communities need protection now. These big tech companies, again, have so much money, and the trajectory of this is really alarming, right? So there's the immediate cost. But these data centers are going to, by 2030, the next couple of years, double the amount of electricity we use. And that electricity is being taken from a finite amount of electricity, which means you all are going to pay more, we're going to pay more, unless the law of the land says, no, they're paying for all of it. That's why this bill is so important. So, I'm going to stop here. Is that okay? Okay, thank you all for listening to.
All right. Thank you, Congressman Landsman. Next, I'm going to introduce Casey Fudge. Casey Fudge is a Republican candidate for governor of Ohio whose campaign centers on an America First platform and strong criticism of big tech's influence in the state. He has emerged as a
Recording in progress.
He has emerged as a prominent voice opposing the rapid expansion of AI and other large data centers in Ohio, arguing they threaten farmland, strain the electric grid, and raise costs for everyday residents. Bush and his running mate, Kim Georgeson, have pushed for aggressive measures such as multi-million moratorium on new data centers, positioning themselves as champions for our items, seeking stronger checks on AI infrastructure and corporate-driven development. Welcome, Casey Bush.
First of all, I'm very honored to be here. Thank you for this making this happen.
It's good. Yes, yes, yes.
Anyway, I'm here with my lovely Lieutenant Governor Kim Georgeson, who is native to the Cincinnati area and is instrumental in all of this. My name is Casey Butch. I'm from Harrisburg, Ohio, and I am running for Governor of Ohio on the Republican ticket. Now, that being said, this is very much a nonpartisan issue, and I just want to talk about this because, let's be honest, I don't think being here in this room, or any of us today, was on our life big a year ago. Now, one of the things that got me, I'm going to be honest, angry enough to be here, because let's be honest, when you vote for a high-level office, you're risking a lot. You're risking your livelihood, your life, your family's livelihood, and their lives. Your reputation forever. One of the things that got me this mad was the babysitter. One of the things I home in Harrisburg, Ohio, and Bowling Green, however I got shot, I didn't know what the heck it was. Huge development. Didn't make sense for houses. Why would they bring it in? My buddy went once, a company told me. Tax agents, skyrocketing electricity bills, basically no jobs, no money back into the economy. And then I started to realize how bad this actually was. Now, at the time of my life, before doing this, I grew up in Ohio. We had a family business, was a small golf course. Not big and fancy as like the grass farmers and have to be responsible for ourselves, our life. We got a lot of generations going way back to the family. People had to be responsible for themselves, serving all the own courses going back. And I'm proud of it. A few details of what I've done. Back in 2012-13, I founded the G's Fudge Education Programs. It's a 501c3 educational charity because I didn't like my college experience. A young person go $100,000 a year in debt for a major with no jobs. We have engineers graduating literally can't turn a screwdriver into an industry. But I figured if I was going to be involved with high-level cars, engineering, and airplane anyway, I should do it the way that matters. And for 11 years, I've been mentoring our investors and engineers and helping them get our jobs. And now they're employed from everywhere, from Chrysler, Ford, Tesla, Lockheed Martin, and a whole host of other great startups. Now, one of the young people had to pay me partner. I would choose them based on what's in their head and their hearts. Not because their last name, not because there's any more. And in that, and I didn't get paid doing that. So I got $10,000 in it. It seemed like some words. But I bring that up because there's no support. There's no support for anything like that. We try to do things for schools, but things are broken from the bottom. And that's why I put 10 years of my life and everything I had in my career are old to make a difference. Another detail, maybe some of you have seen this, I developed a car called the Making Car. Now there's a lot of political rhetoric happening in the late 2000s, from Obama saying he was going to retool Detroit, make cars better. We did it. That bothered me. I knew I could do better because I've been a car guy, restore, build, race all these years. So I set out to build a sustainably recycled manufacturing product, an actual proof of concept. Long story short, when I finally tested it, it got over 100 miles per gallon the first time out on straight diesel, not mine. It's a car that could be mass produced for something like $20,000 to $30,000. And then I did acceleration testing at 89.95 to 0.2 seconds, exactly matching Tesla Model 3 with full charge. So the third day I took EPA's numbers and did the math. My inexpensive recyclable car on straight diesel is a lower carbon footprint per mile than an EV we charge at home. I bring that up not to toot my own horn, but to say, where's the support? Where's the support in industry? Where's the politician who knows how to change their own life? Let alone what industry needs to make a difference. We didn't see it. Yes, I'm a Republican, but I do care about the environment. I care about things moving forward. I care about all of them. I care about all of them. And that's why I put 10 years of my life teaching them how to become possible. And even something small, the watch I'm wearing today. For the last year and a half, I've been prototyping mechanic watches, building a little business. That's just parts. This particular one I built, you can look up the NASA requirements for a astronaut. And it meets those requirements. We're going to the moon in the next couple of years to supply. And I bring that up because there's tariffs. Tariffs that are supposed to bring back manufacturing America. But where's the help and incentive to do anything like that? Where's the help to build a business when I can do this and bring it to? So enough about me. Those are the things because my life work, everything I try to do to see what's wrong out there in Ohio and in America, make things better for young people, education, industry, the automotive So let's get to the data centers. The one that's right by my house is a little bit of a smaller project, about $1 billion project, and I hear it's a medicine. Well, they got a tax subsidy, 10 to 15 years, not paying taxes. They're not building any power generation. So guess what's going to happen? Demand. Our bills are going to skyrocket, just like the other hundreds that are happening. Maybe it creates a few jobs to build it, but the maintenance jobs are small. 100 or less, $85,000 a year. If I did my math right, that's $8.5 million. So that data center, no one looking at it. There we go. Yeah, back to the community. It's $8.5 million for taxes, but otherwise they're not paying taxes. They're not creating an actual product, also getting it anyway. Except all the electricity that we all have to pay for it. But what's worse yet is the environment. Fresh water. The data center is one thing. It's actually a heater that thinks it makes heat. Well, that heat has to go somewhere. Like here, have streams and rivers, and our aquifers. We forget about that. It's an ocean of fresh, beautiful water in Ohio, especially in northwest Ohio where the farms are. What's scary is when you start to see things coming down the pipe. They want rights to the water out of the ground that you own. So if the data centers are one raising the temperatures, I think we all have an idea what that does to the environment, to the ecosystem. Whether you're a naturalist or maybe you're a fisherman that spends a lot of time, you know. And if you're a farmer, you know how diabolical this can be for water and water goods. So they're not bringing anything in Ohio. And they came in under the cover of night, NDA forms. None of us knew what the heck these were when they were already here. That was by design. Tech bros, billionaires, global elite, the people that have no roots in any one place. They go from one place to another, make themselves more powerful and wealthy. Political elite, those who were bought out and sold their souls long ago. They knew exactly what they were doing. And that's why we're all here, because it's not good if we know they're rich. So with regard to data centers, yeah, I am on the government. My opponent on my ticket, I'm not going to bother saying his name, if you know who he is. He's here to facilitate data centers. Spent the last few years just running for office. President. Takes all talking points from somebody that's president now. Rides the coattails. Goes to be in Doge. Didn't do no Doge. Gets booted. AstroTurf in Ohio. Why? Well, who was connected to it? Remember when he was saying on his campaign trail, I think Ohio would have been next Silicon Valley, I thought that was odd. Because Cincinnati's down there, it's great, but this isn't the tech capital. And then if you look at the rest of it, it doesn't make sense, and I kind of laugh at it. So that was BS political rhetoric. So that hopefully all us normies didn't pay attention to what's really happening. The data center. So I don't like it. In terms of being governor, what am I do? I'll be afraid to piss off a few millionaires. I don't want to be a politician and spend my life trying to make the future better for young people in education, building parks that are recycled, better for the environment, better for affordability, better for the street people in the water. Ohio's my home. It's been my family's home for generations. I care about the people. First and foremost, all of them. We are Ohio. We are the best resource, and that means all of us. Democrat, Republican, Independent, Black, white, male, female, rainbow community, strength, doesn't matter. We're the people. We're being taken advantage of. We need leadership who actually will push back and do the right thing for what it is. Understand the repercussions. Not be afraid to do the risk everything before that. And then when they serve their time, leave politics. Go be a farmer and don't be dragged. Guys, I'm hugely happy to be here. This is not a doom and gloom thing. I just want us all to know exactly where we are, because it is that serious. But the fact that we're all here, we can in fact work together. We always hear about the union army, right? Two wings of the same disgusting bird. Flip it over and you realize what that actually means is it's just Americans. It's just all of us. We live in the same place. We all want to build our own community. We want to build our families and our future. We're leaving tomorrow. And that's why I'm here to ensure, because our choices are not good. Guys, thank you so much. We've got awesome experts here that are going to be able to do that. I hope that you will look us up, push4ohio.com. I am a Republican, but I do have a heart, and I'm not afraid to tell them when they're doing things that are wrong. And I'm actually more than happy to walk across any aisle, because the aisle is just artificially created by them. My lovely presenting other, Kim Georgeson, is here. She's going to be able to stay with you for a number of hours, answer any questions. I hope you'll forgive me, but I do have to go along. So thank you all. Very happy to be here.
Thank you guys. And once again, I just think that speaks volumes. That if you guys have noted, we had two individuals with two different parties come here today. This is not a bipartisan issue, right? This is not one side of the aisle or the other. It's definitely a community issue and something that all of us need to take seriously. So thank you once again for coming. To kick off the portion now we get to the fun part as well. So we get to talk to our subject matter experts in our panel discussion. First, we're going to go ahead and kick it off with Mr. Ben Murray. So I have a quick little bio that Emily's going to read about him, and I will leave it for you.
Thank you. Hi, Ben. Ben Murray is an economist and senior researcher at Food and Water Watch. His research covers issues such as water and energy use and financial and economic issues surrounding climate change and agriculture. Ben's research on energy and water use and data centers has been cited extensively and subject of numerous media reports. His family is from Adams County, Ohio, where he has been organizing data center opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. So, yes, as Emily said, I work for Food and Water. So, in March of last year, so about a year ago, I put an environmental fact sheet out about the water and energy use of data centers. That was before a lot of people were talking about it, before the federal government and state governments really rolled out their tax incentives, their environmental deregulation, all the things that have gotten us talking about this issue and aware of it now. So I got involved in the organizing effort more personally in the last month or two when just 2 miles from where I'm currently building a house in Adams County, 1.3 gigawatt data center proposal has come up. Fortunately, it hasn't gone as far as other areas of Sonoma County or Brown County, but these things are going to be pushed through the back door, so I'm trying to raise opposition towards it, but most importantly, transparency around this type of stuff. I'm going to do a quick, just 5 or 10 minute talk touching on, I think, the things that the rest of the panelists will go more in depth to. So hopefully we don't repeat ourselves too much. I want to first just talk about what a data center is. And so we all use the internet, you know, like we mentioned, we all have a Reddit account stored on the internet. I pay my bills on the internet. But when we talk about data centers being built from 2024 on, we're talking about AI, large language model data centers, or even some kind of crypto mining data centers. So these are new type of data centers that run on new computer chips called GPUs or other chips that I'm sure we'll learn about. And as the gentleman before me mentioned, these chips run hotter than the average chip. So that's why the issues of water and power are so important with these new data centers. So they run hotter, they pull more energy. So because they run hotter, they need more cooling than the average data center. You hear a lot about different types of cooling methods when it comes to data centers. They're all water intensive, they're all energy intensive, but there's a trade-off. So if you hear someone talk about, well, we're going to use a non-water intensive cooling system, that may be the case, but it requires a proportionately more amount of energy to run that cooling system. And most of the water use from data centers is actually used in the energy production prior to the data center using the water. So most of the energy, that's called scope 1 water, is the water needed for the electricity production. Scope 2 water is the water needed at a cooling facility, and then scope 3 water is the kind of life cycle water use. But a huge amount of water footprint comes from the amount of a huge energy pull that these data centers have. So they're basically just large buildings, warehouse buildings, with significant amounts of servers, corresponding GPUs or whatever chips they're using, network infrastructure like cables, things like that, and then importantly, huge water and power infrastructure. So even if they pay their rates, even if we make them pay for their electricity, the utility company still spreads infrastructure improvements around the grid. So when someone says they're going to make them pay, we need to make sure that they actually do that, because we haven't seen that yet. So now that's kind of what it is. It's a large campus that has buildings that run computers, pull massive amounts of water, discharge and treat it, and pull massive amounts of energy to run the computer programs in there. So that comes with huge environmental concerns. I'm not going to touch upon that too much right now because we'll talk about that again. And also, I think if you're worried about the environmental concerns, I don't want to get too excited these things are bad. So economically is kind of where I've seen a lot of work to be done on getting the word out about how these things are economic catastrophe, especially for rural areas, and especially for areas that seemingly need new tax revenue and need job creation. One thing that's really missing from the data center talk, I find, is people who talk about the tangible benefits. You know, we go to our local meetings and we ask these people, county commissioners and whoever it is, what are the benefits of this thing coming to our community? And I haven't heard of them. They talk about jobs, and I think we all know these things create dozens of jobs over 15 years, which my cousin who hangs gutters on houses will create more jobs in the next 15 years than a data center. So why does that bring in taxpayer? You know, so those kind of questions, the job questions, I think like we can dismiss, and then tax revenue would be a very important part, but as we're seeing across the state, they have sales tax exemptions at the state level, they have property tax abatements at the community level, and then on top of that, they often have TIF agreements, which means the actual taxes collected on the investment in the data center are directed straight to private infrastructure on that data center. So the actual money making it to schools, fire departments, EMS, and other public services is very minimal. And what that essentially means is the average taxpayer in the community is subsidizing infrastructure for these data centers. And an example I use is, in Adams County, a proposed data center would be so large that they need new fire trucks to be able to service this building because of how large it is. Now, if they're not paying taxes on this, that means the people of Manchester, Ohio, Spring Township, their tax money is going towards paying for a fire truck that services this data center. In Jerome Township in Columbus, they found that the fire department was servicing the building so much, the data center so much, that they had to come back and ask for more resources to serve, for the fire department to service this building. And if you think you get fleeced the first time around by these people and you think you can come back for more, I have a bridge to sell you. So the economic impacts are very dire, I think. This is not economic development in the traditional sense. We should not be using economic development tools to bring these things to the communities in Ohio or anywhere else across the country. And we hear things about why these things are going to happen anyway. We need these things. We need this AI. I haven't been convinced of that yet, but even if that's the case, they shouldn't just pay their share. They should, because them paying their share means they're just paying what we pay. They pay taxes, they pay electricity rates, which as of now are usually discounted because of how much energy they pull. They shouldn't just pay their share. They should pay their share and then some, because they are coming in here, pulling energy, polluting our water, stressing our infrastructure. So they shouldn't just pay their share. We all pay our share. And they should pay their share and then some, because the amount of money they're going to make off of these proprietary AI services in these huge campuses, this money we can't fathom. They should be buying us a new fire truck every single year and paying for the operational costs of it. So if your local commissioners or whoever it is are waiting for a deal to come to them, by the time that deal comes to them, it's too late. These law firms and these growth consultants that work with these, putting these projects together, they want the deal to go through. But we need to have our, if we're trying to fight these things at the local level, we need to have our terms up front. and make sure that any tax revenue coming is long-term tax revenue, because they can be paid not just their fair share, but they need to pay some on top of that as well. And that's what I say to people is, these are bad deals, economically, environmentally. So people say, well, what would you rather have done with some of these plots of land? And my answer to that is, we don't have the luxury right now to provide an alternative, because they're trying to force this thing down our throat right now. So we need to just stop this right now, because right now, doing nothing on a lot of this land would be preferable for the average taxpayer than letting this field go through. And that's because of the economic incentives they're given, the environmental damage they cause. So I think we'll dive deeper into why that's the case with the coming speakers. And yes, thank you. Look forward to answering questions later on as well.
As well. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay, perfect. I had not actually seen the data center in real life. I reminded you guys that I had. So the first 2 weeks after learning about what a data center was, of course, I wanted to see it for myself. I wanted to hear it, I wanted to see it, I wanted to experience it. So we found some great images. Obviously, here in Ohio, Milwaukee, Ohio, there's obvious examples of them on the land in West Jefferson, the same city, right? It's West Jefferson on 71, right? Over to the right, it's Haddonfield. But these are some of the images that we found that just speak volumes. I wanted to make sure that everyone actually could see one. So different communities have different setbacks, but this was one that just spoke volumes to me. As you can see, a community with maybe a setback of 1,000 feet of that. Our community setback is only 70 feet in our community, which is terrifying to me. But look at the size of these bad boys. They're definitely large scale, large footprints, large impacts. So I just wanted to have a couple visual pictures if you have not actually seen a data center up close and personal to kind of get a good grasp for really what they entail. So next we're going to go ahead and kick it off with Mr. Prescott, and I will go ahead and let Sarah do the intro.
All right, Prescott Couch. Sorry. I'm a retired tech executive who spent 38 years during his career in large corporate software development, mainly focused on financial software. He believes we need data centers, but that finding the right place for them is the difficult part. Since resisting one in his hometown of Caledonia, Wisconsin, he has helped communities across the upper Midwest understand the technology and financial risk associated with hyperscale data centers in small communities. His goal is to help level the information playing field for those small towns so that each community can make a fully informed decision. Please welcome Prescott.
First of all, it warms my heart that somebody else has got a firm grasp on this financial risk issue. How bad these deals are is just beyond belief. And I'm really happy there's at least one other person talking about it. I'm going to walk through the rewards of these big deals because I think there are some, or people will be answering the phone and entertaining the proposals. So what are they? What let's be realistic about? Let's talk about the risks as well. And I'm too going to hit on the tax break issue because I think that's probably the most obnoxious part of this entire problem. And then lastly, I want to talk about construction and zoning, which for me was sort of a second-tier issue initially, important but not number one. Now it's really bubbling out to the top of my list as I'm seeing some communities in my state with active development projects, and I'm seeing firsthand an impact on the local residents that has been radically underestimated. So, what are the rewards? Well, the rewards are what all of your elected officials are telling you they are, and they are an eye-watering amount of tax revenue. The smaller the community, the more eye-watering it's going to be. And I can't deny it. You look at the proposed tax revenue that they're going to pay, put aside when they get around to paying it. That dollar amount is massive. It can be an enormous percentage of a village's total tax revenue. Look at that number and you think, we can chauffeur the kids to school for this amount of money every day a year. We can pave the streets with gold, all of our revenue problems are solved. no more tax increases on people, this is great. You will also get an abundant number of construction jobs. Those construction jobs will be itinerant labor, because most of these small communities don't have 1,500, 2,000 construction workers in them. They sort of almost have 1,500 to 2,000 residents in them, so they certainly don't have all construction workers. And you will also see some indirect economic benefit from that construction. Those construction workers will have to have a place to live, they'll have to eat, they'll have to grocery shop, etc. And you will get some benefit of that. And the construction can be relatively long, which I'll come back to in a minute, because that's both a plus and a minus. I do want to also address some of the benefits that you hear about that are flat out myths. I use the word lies, but I don't want to get sued by anybody, but they're pretty close to lies. Direct jobs. I went out to Northern Virginia's Economic Development Corporation, which is easily the most, the Economic Development Corporation is easily the most rosy picture of employment you will ever see until we publish data. And I wanted the rosiest number so I could get the actual data. The actual data for Northern Virginia, which is 550-ish, 560 data centers, is 10,420. If you do that math, that's 18.8 jobs. I'm going to round up to 20. If anybody tells you that the data center that's coming to your town is going to produce more than 20 jobs per building, you just turn around and ask them, why are your data centers less efficiently operated than the ones in Northern Virginia? Simple as that. That's the number. That's a statistically significant sample size. That's what it's going to be. There's a phrase that data center operators use called lights out operation. Their goal is to get to zero. They will never get to zero, but they're always trying to get to zero. And if the average in Northern Virginia is 18, it's going to be 18 where you are, and it's going to drop over time. Because there are so few people in these data centers, they do not generate any indirect economic benefit. Even the smallest towns can absorb 50 new jobs without building a whole bunch of new homes, without adding grocery stores, without adding restaurants. These are such small numbers. It's a rounding error even on small towns and cities. Do not expect any, literally any, indirect economic benefit. Next, there's a joke in the software development field I was in. When a user comes up to you and complains about software not working the way it's supposed to, we say, that's a feature, not a bug, to make you go away if you don't want to fix it. The amount of tax revenue in these deals is a bug, not a feature. That's really important to grasp. This graph right here, this red and the blue, is a city in Wisconsin called Port Washington that has an active project. Their mayor is running around doubling down every single day saying this is the best deal this town has ever seen. When we are done, they are going to be the blue section there, 41.5% of the city's revenue. You do not invest your money this way. Your investment advisor would never recommend you invest your money this way. Having 41.5% of your tax revenue from one single taxpayer from one single industry is as dumb a thing as I can think of. And every community that's really taking this time is so upset about these tech companies going after these small towns. They are visiting upon them more financial risk than they've ever seen. Nobody would willingly walk into this kind of financial risk with their own money. But for some reason, they're willing to do it with your money. Technology throws away its old technology really, really fast. It's an industry that is highly volatile. To put this many eggs in one basket is just simply financially irresponsible. This is my lead argument when I go into a new community to say, please look at this and understand that that amount of revenue for your town is not a good thing. It is a very dangerous thing. This is no way to responsibly run a small town. Next, the technology industry has this thing called a hype cycle, which is the only thing technology people agree on is when there's a new technology that comes along, we get really excited about it. We did this with desktop computers, we did this with the internet, now we're doing it with AI. Oh my God, think of all these great things we can do. We're going to go crazy, we're going to start up all kinds of new companies, we're going to build new data centers, we're going to small one is the size of the current data center industry. The large one is the currently proposed aggregate value of data centers being proposed / built. There is no industry ever that grows that fast that doesn't make a complete and utter mess. There will be a mess. Where will your proposal be when that mess happens? When the financial capital gets pulled back out, when people realize we've overbuilt, when some software developer makes artificial intelligence as an algorithm much more efficient, and we realize we have too many data centers and that value plunges, where will your proposal be? Will your community be protected against that? Maybe. What about a half-built building? What about a half-built campus? Did you just come in 1,000 beautiful acres of your land to something that is now only used to say 100 acres out of the rest of it is just sitting there forever, underutilized, never be used for anything else? Tax breaks. We should talk about this all day. These are the most obnoxious things. In the good old days, when we started doing this, there was a trade-off. We said to the developer, bring your business here, bring your jobs here, people will build homes, people will go to the grocery store, they'll want new restaurants, great, we'll generate some indirect economic benefit. The community gets jobs, they get temporary and permanent jobs. They get indirect economic benefit, they get blighted property remediation, they get something out of the deal, and someone somewhere was looking out for you, doing the math, that said if we give them $1 million in tax breaks, we'll get $1.5 million back in indirect economic benefit, and there was a favorable calculation there. Somewhere along the way to this whole data center boom, we gave up on the right side of that equation, and now it's just tax break, and we're getting absolutely nothing in return. 50 jobs per minute is not a lot. It's not worth $1 billion in tax breaks, which is what we have approximately in Wisconsin for 3 active projects, $1 billion in sales and use tax exemption plus property tax abatement. It is utterly criminal and is a rip-off of taxpayers. I'm glad to hear multiple politicians talking about how that is in this room too. That's good. Switching topics just a tiny bit, but obviously we're data centers. This is an issue that every community is getting wrong. Zoning regulations always focus on the permanent use of the property. The setbacks should be this based on the building spec, based on whatever generators are going to use, we're going to have noise at this decibel level of this boundary. It's all focused on the permanent use of the property. Data center construction is really unique in that the delta between the construction burden, the sort of construction use of the property and the permanent use of the property is vast. The construction of these things is heavy industrial and it lasts for years. A single building can take, on the short end, a little over a year. I've not seen that, but they tell me it can be. The one in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, down the road from me, took 2.5 years to go from start a project to operational, and they're going to build 15 of them. So do the math on that. They're building them one at a time because they manage their own technology change risk by building consecutively. They don't build 15 of them at once because they know the technology changes so fast it would be prohibitively expensive to retrofit that technology into the 15 buildings they just built. So if you have a heavy industrial use of the project, and it's going to last 10 years, at what point do you have to address that burden in your zoning regulations? I know communities doing this. I've not seen one yet that has addressed this problem. It is the single biggest problem. If you go to any one of these communities and look at the parcel being built, for the first 6 months it's earth-moving equipment like you've never seen before, and then the next 4 months is pile driving, and then it's industrial scale buildings. This should be nowhere near residents, nowhere near schools, nowhere near parks, nowhere near hospitals. It is just simply sadistic to do this to people that live nearby. And until the zoning regulation accounts for this long duration construction project in a heavy industrial scale, this problem will continue. And the focus, take the focus off of the permanent use. It is benign compared to the construction. You have to get the construction phase right and manage that in your zone. And get your communities to stop now and realize this problem exists. Take a pause, fix the zoning. Don't visit this problem on people. Don't statistically visit this problem on people that live nearby. They should be nowhere near humans when they build these things. And I think that's it.
I do not know how to say his last name. Derek? Okay. If he was to say it. Welcome, Spencer. Derek, am I saying that right?
Spencer Derek is the Vice President of Government Affairs at the Ohio Environmental Council Action Fund, where he leads a statewide team working with lawmakers, partners, and communities to advance policy on clean energy, water, land conservation, and democracy. A Columbus-based advocate and political strategist, he has built a career at the intersection of policy and politics, leading bipartisan lobbying efforts, helping secure millions in public funding, and supporting the passage of legislation and ballot initiatives across Ohio, including Link US in Central Ohio. Derek previously founded a political consulting firm where he recruited candidates and managed campaigns at the local, state, and federal level, helping elect a diverse state of leaders, and later served as Vice President for the Midwest at the Young Democrats of America, supporting state parties and developing national programming. A lifelong Ohioan, he graduated summa cum laude from Ohio State University with degrees in political science and economics, grounding his work in both policy, expertise, and practical political change. Thank you.
Thank you. I should have copy and pasted that into clearly, so it's my bad. But thank you so much for being here. I'm Spencer Muir, and I'm Vice President of Government Affairs for the Ohio Environmental Council, and I'm going to be relying on my notes heavily today because I'm about to throw a lot of statistics at you, and I'd like to get those numbers right. But too long-didn't-read version of this presentation, I was asked to address the environmental impact of data centers on energy, water, and cooling in particular. So the long story short here is the impact is pretty substantial. So I'm going to be taking you through a few things here. First off, why is Ohio ground zero in this conversation? So Ohio already has 200 data center facilities, with roughly half concentrated just in central Ohio. That already makes us second in the country for the number of hyperscale data centers. Data centers have received approximately $2.5 billion, that's billion with a B dollars, in state and local tax incentives since 2014. And the OC Action Fund has been fielding calls across the state from communities who are concerned about water use, they're concerned about air pollution, and they're concerned about what this means for the future of their communities. So let's start off by talking about what a hyperscale data center is. A data center is a physical facility that houses critical applications, services, and data, basically the backbone of our internet and growing technology. However, hyperscale data centers are in a different category entirely than just what you would call your average data centers. They're massive in size, typically built on rural campuses, and are designed for economies of scale. They can take over 10,000 square feet to build and house over 5,000 servers. Each of those 5,000 servers running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They never turn off. One report found that global demand for data center capacity could more than triple by 2030. This scale of continuous around-the-clock operation is the root of the resource challenges that I'm going to be talking about more in detail here in a moment. So let's start off with energy. Why do data centers use so much energy? I think it's important that we understand why these problems are happening in order for us to really confront them responsibly and in
must run continuously. Unlike a lot of other industrial facilities, there's no off switch on a data center. A single large data center can use as much electricity as tens of thousands of homes. In 2023, U.S. data centers consumed an estimated 176 terawatt hours of electricity. That is more than the entire annual energy consumption of the state of New Jersey. That's it for 1 second. The entire state of New Jersey. Nationally, data centers roughly account for about 4% of U.S. electricity demand, but reports show that the demand for the electric demand that these data centers are going to be pursuing is projected to rise to 6 to 12% by 2028. So we're seeing a massive increase on top of this already large shift. Ohio specifically has faced the forefront of this problem. PJM, which is our regional grid, PJM capacity prices surged from 29 megawatts hours per day to $329 in 2 years. That is a tenfold increase, and data centers account for 63% of that spike. For the average Ohio family, that translates into roughly $70 more per month on their electric bill by 2028. AEP Ohio, which is the main utility in central Ohio, customers saw an average increase of $27 a month last summer due to new generation costs. And all the while, Ohio's sales tax exemptions for data centers equipment. So this is not even the property tax exemption that we've been talking about, but also the sales tax exemption on all the supplies that they use to build these data centers. They don't have to pay sales tax on much of it. That sales tax exemption has exploded from just $30 million in 2018 to $140 million in 2025. That's a 3,000% increase while generating just 356 jobs across 13 agreements. That's roughly $1 million per job that we are paying as taxpayers to subsidize these locations. So, let's talk about the water impacts. That was the end. Let's talk about the water impacts. So why do these need to use so much water? Again, all those servers are running 24/7 and they generate an enormous amount of heat. And if that heat is not removed, the equipment fails. Anyone who has ever used their laptop on their lap for a little bit too long on the couch knows it starts to get real hot at the bottom. And if you don't stop, it's going to break your computer. The same rule applies here, but like times thousands or more. What we see is that if heat is not removed, the equipment fails. So cooling is fundamentally not optional, it is a core operational requirement. The most common method of cooling is currently evaporative cooling, where water passes over pads or membranes as it evaporates and it cools the surrounding air. The critical problem with that is that most of that water is then lost to the atmosphere. It does not return easily to our rivers, lakes, or groundwater. It is into the atmospheric system and goes back into the ocean. This is called consumptive use, a permanent loss from local water supply. So how much water exactly are we talking about? Hyperscale data centers can use between 1 and 5 million gallons of water per day. 5 million gallons of water per day is roughly the water a city the size of about 50,000 people needs, which is a sixth of the size of Cincinnati. Nationally, in 2023, data centers consumed 17 billion gallons of water, and hyperscale data centers are projected to withdraw as much as 150 million gallons over the next 5 years. That would be equivalent to what 4.6 million American households would use over that same period. Ohio has a total of 4.8 million households. I wish I could say this was there. But there is more, because there is also a water energy nexus problem. Even data centers, as one individual has mentioned so far, even data centers that use what they call efficient or low water required cooling centers still drive massive indirect water use on top of their cooling water use. So generating electricity requires generating electricity using coal, natural gas, or nuclear power plants all rely on water for cooling. 70% of all Great Lakes water use in 2023 was not associated with just drinking water or other water was associated with power generation and cooling. A data center that switches to less water-intensive cooling may simply be shifting that water demand to the power plant supplying the electricity. Energy decisions are fundamentally also water decisions, and Ohio communities are rarely shown both sides of that ledger. So let's talk about, oh yeah, I'll just briefly about wastewater and perhaps, so it's not just about how much water that data centers use. It's not just about how much water data centers use, it's about what happens when they come back out. Data centers discharge heated water and cooling tower blowdown. This is water containing elevated concentrations of salts, biocides, and corrosion inhibitors. In 2026, the Ohio Environmental Council Law Center filed comments opposing the Ohio EPA's proposed general permit for data center wastewater discharges, which would have effectively allowed, which effectively can, so Ohio EPA is still considering this, allow data centers to discharge their wastewater directly into our lakes, rivers, and streams. Effectively, this would be a rubber stamp that fails to satisfy Clean Water Act requirements. One of the really interesting components of this is even just getting into this information over the last few months has been a lot of people talk about the water impacts, a lot of people talk about the energy impacts, but there is a growing science around the air health impacts coming directly from these data centers and indirectly, and I want to name that as well. A report from the Community and Environmental Defense Services found that a single data center could pose negative health risks to people living as close as as far as a half mile away. And risks increase when their home is near multiple data centers. Air pollution risks come from data centers emitting nitrogen dioxide and tiny inhalable particles that harm people's lungs. Data centers also rely on diesel backup generators, among the strongest pollutants, which run during testing and outages. Developers pursuing behind-the-meter natural gas generation, which is the majority of data centers and hyperscale proposed data centers in Ohio right now, bring additional fossil fuel infrastructure and air pollution directly into our communities. To be clear, Ohio does not currently require health impact assessments before data centers are sited. Groundwater is also a very big concern. I'm going to talk a little bit about floods because that's where the vast majority of the data centers coming to Ohio are gone, to central Ohio, so that's where some of this concern is the most concentrated. But fewer than 1/3 of data centers, just nationally, track water usage comprehensively across their facilities. More than 97% of data centers rely on municipal water supplies, so their individual use is invisible to public records. In order to further hide that data from individuals and from the public, many companies shield projected water and energy use behind non-disclosure agreements, or NDAs, even when communities are being asked to approve zoning or tax incentives. To be clear, local governments cannot plan for what they cannot measure, and Ohio communities are increasingly being asked to make permanent land use decisions with incomplete information, and you have to ask yourself why that is. So lastly, before I talk about some solutions, the transparency problem. And this is a really critical issue here. Actually, this is what I was just talking about, my bad. I just forgot to move the slides, so I already did that. So let's talk about some solutions. So what is the OEC Action Fund, our 501c4 organization, calling for? First off is transparency. We want full public disclosure of water and energy use, a ban on NDAs for resource consumption data, and full transparency for communities. Second, we want to protect our communities, which means preserving local government authority to stop state preemption on data center siting. There is legislation that has been proposed at the state level that would preempt local governments, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen. Third, comprehensive planning. We need to require statewide water and energy impact analysis, extend and strengthen the proposed data center study commission, and produce meaningful recommendations about our land, our water, and our air. Fourth, ratepayer protections. This is really critical for all those folks who are worried about the rise in energy costs, as you should be. Data centers must pay the full cost of water, wastewater, and grid infrastructure. It's not enough just to pay for the power they're using, but when they demand such a large share of our new energy supply, that requires upgrades and investments in our infrastructure, which they're not currently paying for, and those costs fall on us as consumers and ratepayers. So data centers should be paying for that grid infrastructure, which means extending something that actually the AEP has done in Central Ohio and got approved by the statewide Public Utilities Commission, is something called an 85% capacity rule, which basically ensures that they cannot put infrastructure costs on massive new demand upon ratepayers and then not use that demand. They will have to pay for the demand that they are projecting. We also want to end the $140 million in statewide sales tax exemptions. Finally, number 5 is conserving our resources. We want strong water efficiency standards. We want to prohibit withdrawals during drought conditions, require the use of reclaimed or non-potable water when feasible, require health impact assessments when sited near schools and neighborhoods because of common sense. Ohio has a real choice in this matter, and we can let the industry come in and get started before writing the rules and let them write the rules, or we can write them first. And we are here to make sure that communities have a voice before the permits are signed and that we take action to protect our environment. Thanks so much.
Next up, we have Nathan Alley.
Nathan Alley is a conservation program coordinator for Sierra Club, Ohio, where he works to advance climate action, clean energy, and environmental justice across the state. A native of Greater Cincinnati and an environmental attorney by training, he spent more than a decade practicing environmental and land use law before joining Sierra Club in 2014. Alley serves on Cincinnati's Environmental Advisory Board and the Green Cincinnati Plan Steering Committee, helping shape local policy on climate sustainability and green infrastructure. He also teaches as an adjunct assistant professor in environmental studies at the University of Cincinnati, connecting students with real-world campaigns to protect public health, communities, and natural resources. Allie is a graduate of Indiana University Bloomington and New York University School of Law. Please welcome Nathan Alley.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. Thank you very much for having me here today and for having all of us. I've already learned a lot today, and I hope you all have as well. And I'm assuming that most of us are here because we have some small inkling of the problems associated with data centers. And we want to learn more about that problem and then what we can do about it. So I'm going to try to provide a bridge from what Spencer was talking about to what some of our other panelists are going to talk about. We're really going to focus on solutions. First, I did want to just really quickly introduce the Sierra Club, in case some of you don't know who we are. The Sierra Club is a national organization. We build ourselves as one of the oldest and largest in the country, but we have an Ohio chapter. That's actually what I work for. And we also have a very active local group called the Miami Group that does wonderful programming. Our mission is to explore, enjoy, and protect in that order. And so they'll help you get outside and enjoy our abundant environment here in Ohio and Southwest Ohio. And then we'll also work on protecting it together. So let's talk about that a little bit today. I'm going to talk about the environmental impacts that Spencer touched on. Actually, touched on. Went very detailed and provided some great information. So thank you very much. I'm just going to glide on that. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about some policy restrictions that have been discussed in Ohio. What is sort of the state of play up until 2026 and kind of where we're going from here. So join me as we dive into that. What are, again, the environmental impacts that Spencer so eloquently talked about include impacts on water quality, impacts of overconsumption of water. We've got air impacts, we've got impacts associated with global climate change, and then we've also got impacts associated with land use, and particularly the conversion of either active agricultural lands, perhaps habitat conversion, or even land that could otherwise be used for higher and better uses such as affordable housing. So we've got all these pressures, all these impacts. How do we avoid that? Number one, don't build more data centers. It's that simple. Obviously, that's probably not going to be how it's going to happen. So, what are some other tricks that we can use? So, I mentioned land use. The number one thing, of course, is we don't want to use green fields, places that have been undisturbed previously, that are already host to communities and organisms and ecosystems, or otherwise, again, better used for things like agriculture and housing. So we need to make sure that new data centers, if they are being built, are sited appropriately in areas that are zoned for those types of uses. We also, of course, as Spencer was talking about, want to limit data centers' use of fresh water, water that should and could be used for other very important things, and we do not have endless quantities of, even here in Ohio, or we're lucky in some other states out west. And then, speaking of water, of course, Spencer did mention all of the wastewater impacts associated with data centers. Let's ensure that those just don't happen. Let's maybe close loop systems, recycle water, use other systems to keep that wastewater out of our drinking water supplies, out of our ecosystems, out of our surface waters and groundwaters. And then we also, of course, need to control air pollution, not only from the data centers themselves, but from the energy generation that's used to power them. Speaking of that energy generation, if we are going to power these data centers, let's do it with 100% renewable energy. Let's not be building new natural gas plants, coal-fired plants, and no nuclear anywhere, please. So, what are some people doing to potentially affect these solutions already? So, to rewind, we've already heard it mentioned several times already, but for more than a decade now, Ohio's stated statewide policy has been to encourage the development of data centers. The state legislature has actively welcomed data centers to locate in Ohio. The way they did that initially was through the operating budget in 2013, it was House Bill 59, that gave that sales tax exemption that you've heard mentioned to data centers' purchases of their equipment and other infrastructure. And you've heard the statistics about how much money we're losing out on tax base because of that, but also it's one of the many incentives that's being used to try to get more data centers. We're trying to limit them, slow them for data centers, not accelerate them. But that has been statewide policy for at least 13 years now. More data centers. For a long time, there wasn't much specific legislation about them, but in the last legislative session, 2023-2024, there were some bills that were introduced, again, primarily to spur more data center development in Ohio, and very concerning, I think it was already mentioned, but some of these bills would have limited local land use control over the siting and zoning of these centers, and put that decision at a state level. This, of course, dives into the whole issue of the rule and how much do we want to put decisions that affect local communities at a decision-making level that is above them. We may not consider what their needs and concerns might be. So we want to keep local control over these land use decisions. And so fortunately, most of those bills kind of died a quiet death. But still, I think the tenor was to support more data center development. Fast forward to 2026, and if you do a quick search, there's at least 6 bills on the table that, or at least some that are passed, that address data centers in some way. An important one, which was actually just about a year ago, was House Bill 15. This was a large bill that covered a lot of energy topics. But one thing it did, it allowed data centers and other investors to essentially build their own on-site or adjacent power generation. It has to be what's called behind the meter, so they're not plugged into the grid in that way. They're generating their own power. And in some ways, you might think that's not a bad thing, because they're not then competing, they're not driving up rates, they're not putting pressure on the system. And all those things are true. Unfortunately, what's probably anticipated is that all those on-site generators are going to be natural gas, right? We don't want that. For all the host of reasons that we've heard about, local air quality, global climate change, and not only that, but extrapolating back to where the natural gas is coming from. I've seen some folks in the audience today who are working really hard, for example, to stop oil extraction in our state parks, right? And all of the dangers that come not only with just traditional extraction, but hydraulic fracturing for natural gas and oil. And so the Unfortunately, now here in 2026, we have some bills on the table that would seek to actually address some of the problems and achieve some of the solutions that we've heard about today. One important bill is Senate Bill 378. You might hear a little more about this in a minute, but it would control water consumption and ensure that the data center consumption of water is not stressing local water systems and being more on water ratepayers. And then similarly, you've heard a lot about shielding ratepayers from the cost of developing infrastructure associated with data centers. House Bill 706 will speak to that. So there are two good bills on the table in Ohio right now that will talk to some of these problems. Then there's also a bill you're probably going to hear more about if you haven't already, and that is Senate Bill 646. And this would establish a commission to study data centers. Interestingly, we have all the information. We've heard it today. We don't need to do a whole lot of study to figure out why they're bad and what we need to do about it. But this would at least be a step in the right direction. What we want to ensure, however, is this is a bill that just doesn't get lost in a file drawer somewhere and become part of launch because they studied it to let data centers run free in Ohio. And so I think you're going to hear a little bit more about this. The last thing I wanted to touch on, and I mentioned earlier, is the importance of local control over these projects and community voices in where these projects are going to be sited and whether they're going to happen at all. And fortunately, we've got communities like the city of Cincinnati. I imagine many of you probably are local, and the city of Cincinnati has a moratorium at the moment on data center development as it considers its own options moving forward, where they are in place, what kind of restrictions are in place on the development of data centers. And I know that the city of Cincinnati is not alone in having that conversation in Ohio, and if your community is not having that conversation, I would encourage you to ask people to do so. I'm going to stop there, but I think we're going to be available for questions after the panel, and I just wanted to thank everybody for all the great information you shared today. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you all for being here. Thanks again.
Next up, we have Molly Bryden. Molly Bryden is the climate and sustainability researcher at Policy Matters Ohio, a nonprofit, nonpartisan research institute focused on building a more vibrant, equitable, and sustainable Ohio. She leads research on clean energy, climate policy, and the impacts of large energy users such as data centers, helping communities and lawmakers understand how to balance economic development with environmental and equity concerns. Bryden has authored analysis on federal climate investments, community solar, and Ohio's data center build-out, emphasizing the need for strong labor standards, community benefits, and protections for working families and ratepayers. She holds a bachelor's degree in sociology from Case Western Reserve University and a Master of Public Administration in Nonprofit Management from Cleveland State University, bringing a justice-focused perspective to statewide climate and energy debates. Welcome, Molly.
Hi everyone, I'm going to be talking through some of the Policy Matters Ohio's work on data centers today. So we kind of made our first foray into this work when our research director released a report on the expensive state tax rates for data centers that was published last year. We started getting more in the weeds once we received a request for support from a community member in Wilmington, Ohio, and we responded to a harmful property tax agreement on a $4 billion Amazon data center project, which we co-wrote with our partners Good Jobs First, delivered to Wilmington City Council. And we recently released a data center brief to tee up a broad policy platform, mitigating harms and empowering communities in navigating the data center code. So our policy platform centers around state and local taxpayer subsidies, community benefits and guardrails, good jobs and labor standards, democracy and transparency, and energy affordability and environmental protections. Today I'm just going to be focusing impacts of the rapid expansion of data centers across Ohio? Okay, so we heard a bit about the sales tax exemption for data centers, and I just want to highlight that the state will forego more than $140 million a year in sales tax revenue for data centers in fiscal years 2026 through 2027, and that amount will only grow as data center expansion accelerates. And in fact, I think it's interesting to point out how data center companies can exploit or find loopholes in these agreements. For example, the incentive package that the state offered to Amazon in 2014 isn't set to expire until 2055. And that was far before we really saw this rapid proliferation of hyperscale data centers, which is the larger facilities that are drawing way more energy and water, which drains our grid and drains our natural resources. We're also seeing a growing narrative about the need for expensive state and local tax subsidies using job creation estimates to make the claim that data centers aren't the driver for long-term growth. However, it is important to acknowledge that, especially during the construction phase, these projects have created long-term steady work for the building and construction trades unions because the work requires such specialized labor, and the construction timelines sometimes range up to several years, depending on the scope. Data center investment has produced substantial work for the labor unions, along with opportunities to connect Ohioans to good-paying union jobs through apprenticeship training programs. But beyond the jobs created during the construction phase, data center projects often offer negligible social and economic benefits to the surrounding community while straining our grid and our natural resources, which we've already covered a lot of in the previous conversation. When considering all the negative externalities surrounding irresponsible data center development, that really calls into question whether these taxpayer subsidies are necessary. And in fact, Bo Williams, who is an executive with Microsoft who works on data centers, stated himself that he can't think of a site selection or placement decision that was decided on a set of tax incentives. At the same time, local governments also forfeit local tax revenue through long-term property tax agreements to incentivize investment in data center companies. If the tax incentives are used, they should be contingent on communities or contingent on commitments to strong labor standards and meaningful community benefits. But we reviewed a few community reinvestment area agreements between local governments and Amazon data centers, which essentially include copy-paste language that does not create any guardrails or enforcement mechanisms that would require a data center company to make good on the job creation estimates that they include in these agreements. And again, just going back to all of the potential harms risked by irresponsible data center development, we have been hearing from local communities across the state about their concerns around data centers coming to town. Water use has emerged as a leading concern among Ohio communities, closely followed by energy affordability and nuclear protections, and air quality and air pollution. Also touching on other issues like public health, ranging from noise pollution to transparency and NDAs to wildlife protection. And these concerns and requests for support have really been ramping up as we see data centers proliferate across the state. Ohio is home to around 200 data centers in operation with a handful of managed facilities. Most of these are co-locations or smaller facilities needed to store data, process data, and support things that we use daily like cloud services. But the main concern is the recent growth in large data centers, sometimes known as hyperscalers, that are being built to support AI and other large machine learning programs, which puts immense pressure on our energy and water systems and other resources needed to power them. The lion's share of those hyperscalers are concentrated in central Ohio. Data centers and the hyperscalers in particular have serious implications for energy affordability, grid reliability, and fossil fuel reliance. In the last 10 years, the average demand for commercial customers increased by 24%, while residential demand remained relatively flat. And at the same time, residential customers saw their average monthly electricity costs increase by 35%. And it's not, we don't have the data to directly link the increasing rates to data center growth alone. The rapid expansion and the irresponsible development decisions that are being made across the state only exacerbate the growing risk of an energy supply shortfall while driving up costs for residential and small commercial ratepayers, especially without stronger ratepayer protections. And this is because in recent years there's been a huge surge in supplemental transmission spending, and there are a range of drivers for those projects. Supplemental transmission projects are those that are needed for local reliability needs and aren't required to meet regional or federal reliability standards. A lot of those supplemental transmission projects are linked to customer requests. So a data center would have to approach a utility and make a request to add a certain amount of load, which is then brought to PJM's Transmission Expansion Advisory Committee, and then they take those proposals under consideration, identify alternative solutions, and estimate costs. In AEP's transmission zone, which covers Central Ohio, where most of the hyperscalers are located, those customer requests have an ultimate cumulative peak demand of nearly 10 megawatts, which is enough to power more than 500,000 homes. Some of these projects might not actually materialize due to a range of factors like local decision-making, outcomes of future TEAC meetings, and the fact that data centers tend to shop around more favorable regulatory environments, which has led to duplicative requests and corresponding overinflation of speculative load growth, which is used to determine the capacity prices that we pay. Just to oversimplify it, we need to make sure that we have enough generation capacity connected to the grid to meet demand at any given time, especially during times of peak demand when energy consumption is high, there's risks around grid stress. So I think a lot of people may have heard about the results from PJM's capacity auction. The 2024 auction that went into effect last summer, which led to a huge hike in rates, and I think Ohio customers saw their bills increase by around 10 to 36% based on the increasing capacity prices due to the shortfall between energy supply and demand. In Ohio, we are a net energy importer, which means we purchase around 15% of our electricity from plants in other states, which is then transported to Ohio by way of the regional transmission grid. So just with all these considerations, the shocking amount of electricity that data centers require to operate really necessitates improving utility accountability measures and requiring data centers to pay their fair share of these costs. We talked a little bit about the behind-the-meter considerations, and there are so many caveats to behind-the-meter requirements. Some ideas have been floated that would require data centers to build their own generation infrastructure, which, again, that's leading to huge natural gas projects being sited in or right next to residential areas, and there are a ton of concerns that we have about the public health impacts and the lack of guardrails or discussion of a remediation plan or decommissioning plan, and who's going to pay for that. Okay, so our goal for our work around data centers is to resource local communities with the tools that they need to determine whether and how data centers invest in their communities. There are a range of policy mechanisms at the state and local level that are available to address the myriad concerns that communities have. We have, in our point of view, establishing strong labor standards for construction jobs and enabling communities to negotiate agreements with commitments for high road operation and maintenance jobs, and then enhance democracy and transparency around proposed data centers, establish community oversight mechanisms for existing facilities, while strengthening protections for highway repairs, communities, and our natural resources by mitigating economic and environmental harms generated by the rapid expansion of this resource-intensive industry. I just want to highlight the NDA piece because obviously it's establishing a community benefits agreement on this project would be a great way to tailor some of these deals to communities' unique needs while enabling them to have more power in informing important development decisions that will have wide-ranging impacts in their communities. But these tools are very heavy lift. They often use of NDAs that conceal any information about these projects until it's essentially too late to intervene or inform some of the decisions that are being made. Hinders communities' ability to have a seat at the table in key stages of the project negotiations. So it's very important that we are considering communities' concerns and giving them a seat at the table instead of just leaving them on the menu, especially as we see how irresponsible this development has been so far. We really need to do everything we can to engage communities and inform lawmakers about how they can set up stronger protections for arrival communities to prevent the legacy of extraction that a lot of communities are still grappling with. Thank you.
Molly brought up a lot of great points about making it difficult for these data centers to come into our communities, right? And I'm interested to talk to Paul, so one of my largest questions after I learned about our data center is, what is it like? What do we do now? How do we stop it? If we can't stop it, then what does it look like, right? What life lessons have you learned that you've heard from us as we're navigating these experiences too? So, welcome, Paul.
Well, introduction for Paul Walker. He is a longtime Hillard community leader who served more than a decade on the Hillard City Schools Board of Education, helping guide local decisions on school finance, growth, and student opportunity. He also served as the interim fiscal officer of Norwich Township in Franklin County. Retiring as the VP of MCI WorldCom's Web Hosting Unit, Lambert has led the construction and operations of large-scale data centers across the U.S. and Europe. He brings deep technical and economic insight into conversations about how big infrastructure projects affect local communities. Lambert has had an active voice in recent debates over Amazon's 3 existing data centers and campuses in Hillard and associated on-site fuel cell and diesel generation, raising concern about air pollution, carbon emissions, and community limits on local government control over on-site power generation. Drawing on his experience in IT and local government, he now works with residents and advocacy groups to push for transparent and engaged community-centered decisions on development. He publishes the Educate Hillard page on Facebook. Please welcome Paul Lambert.
My name is Paul. I'm from Mason. So we've got a few of these for a while, as it's been mentioned. One of the concentrations is in our little town, which is a western suburb. This began 10 years ago for us in Central Ohio. I was a member of the school board when this began. We had a company called Data show up and say they were interested in Stacy was gracious for us and very much and she aggressive proposals. And guess what? After it all, I say draw our shorts to the best possible proposal out there and take it all through, which was the final one. I'm sorry. How about that? Okay, so here's what's going on to do it. This is their first phase. We thought it was the only phase. That big lot that you see coming on the left of the frame is the Amazon campus. Just for grades, I included on the right side of the frame is the County Surveillance Services headquarters that I've worked for 30 years. And there's a little diamond right in the middle of that, which is one of the biggest data centers that we built in Central Ohio a little bit. I had some responsibility for that. You can see that's about the size of the parking lot for the security building that is on the center. Those buildings that survive the buildings. So what was the impact of this first one? By the way, as a member of the school, I voted to support the economic development package that was run for this site. They did a pretty good job with the actual construction of those assets. That site is already in comp plan for the city as a commercial development, so it requires, and I would say it's pretty restrictive about what architecture needs to look like. And I think they did a pretty good job of these buildings using the traffic and the landscaping is the building beautiful there. The line is basically drive past it. If you knew those are being industrial or commercial operations or anyway, this one is going to be back in the roads. And it turns out that that's a big problem. Even when the generators are going, I caught a time when one of the generators, I think it's probably something over 50 or 90 site down. Even when they were running, I went in and still on the sidewalk next to this, if I could get located in generators. But that was actually 270, which is right behind. Okay, so why wasn't the argument that this was fine? Well, first of all, gave them property tax abated through until for 100% of their property taxes, and it's abated for 30 years. You may know that when you have a building that's a technology building, the real estate property tax is only on the ground of the building. All the stuff that's inside used to be the servers and all the network and so on. Used to be taxed as personal property tax in a while, but that was eliminated long term by the TAP administration. So even if this was fully taxed and not abated, they don't even pay taxes on the building and all the expensive stuff that's inside. The Delaware was wonderful for our city and the thousands of construction workers that were on site for a while. As we said previously, our press conference, there were about 200 workers. I don't know where they were. There are some of the sites all over the city still in our centers. But with this abated, school district township has a whole challenge. And I thought that was going to be the last one. Benefits might be. By the way, this is a little more subtle than we were not sure but as a member of the school, we were always concerned about growth workers. We build hospitals in large workers. And from my perspective, it was a good thing that also wanted to take off the market for housing development, just so that we can actually get to the schools. So, like the schools, they do absorb it. They were coming along with the initial phase. This was on a piece of ground that was actually owned by the city. They intended to do a sports facility there. It didn't keep one essential city. That's the city sold it to Amazon to another phase. By the way, there's kind of two classes of these data centers. In the first phase, those are really data centers that are for traditional web services, so you can do things like that. That's eBay, you don't want your presence for a lot of retailers and so on. So it's really kind of community intensive kind of facilities. These new facilities that they built, like the ones in this picture, all are AI. They're very dense, in essence, giant single supercomputer that's used for training AI. So sources. So we generate the density from an electronic standpoint, which is really an enormous amount of heat, consume a lot of electricity, very dependent on installation and pushing wells. With this, we asked a little bit more in the field. Some school districts got a deal here. They pay the school district like first quarter of these, and so it generates 2 million hours a year of feed to our school district, which is significant. Budget for our school district is about $4 million a year. So this is, I think, just the big township has built, which is kind of important argument because the township was a community park. Okay, and I thought maybe phase 2 was the it was another. They bought a piece of land just down the freeway, so these were probably about 2 miles from my house in the direction. They bought a piece of land and are in the process of building this out right now. One of the things that we're going to this one is that they take in an hour of AEP. So we're going to be putting a fuel cell, natural gas powered fuel cell facility on the site. It's going to be 73 megawatts. This is the largest fuel cell, natural gas fuel cell facility that's been built in the country. Second largest in the world so far. And you can see this is right in the middle of the neighborhoods. It's proposal in the park. When I saw this was going to happen, I started reading tax credits and blue energy was reading these fuel cells. And one of the subtle statistics in the parameters this fuel cell facility is that when it's all up and running, it will generate 1.5 million pounds per day of carbon dioxide and release it around. I know about carbon dioxide, it's a heavy gas that can stay in the ground. I think we pretty low carbon dioxide around the fuel cell installation itself can be lethal. If someone walks into it, it dissipates the neighborhoods around. We're going to see what happens with that. The EPA society is just fine. The neighborhood is fine. Their views are very heavy on this one. We do a lot of public outcry and activism in the community about this. Okay, so this hyperscalers everywhere, already on the bottom. The key is as much as they want to return to on-site generation facilities. One of the things that's really good, so as a technologist and something building data centers, this is terrible. This is the utilization grid for one of the data centers that which almost happens to be, it's not one of those technologies, another one that's from the country. This shows the piece of data is floating is over about 2 to 8 and you can see these places where it goes to near zero and then suddenly spikes to a very high level. These are swings on the order of hundreds of megawatts of demand in milliseconds. I don't know if the images that probably number of milliseconds. We have a lot of tough time with this. I think they're going to have to turn the batteries as a way to be supercapacitor to generate power in this country on sort of short durations. So what else is doing? Putting your own power on the site. I can't really use these generators yet. They'll have generators that will reverse back, but it's not really economical to run diesel generators as a continuous flow source. Gas turbines do have to be pretty much short gas is cheap to visit a lot. Jet natural gas to the site. AWS, as I mentioned, is trying out fuel cells. Meta is putting in 400 megawatt extreme generating facilities. Gas turbines a lot of the right energy generators. We make a lot of noise. It depends on what they do for the rules of data. Meta is also talking about putting in small modular reactors. If you go to the pipeline, there was a facility there for decades. I don't know facility called the Portsmouth Gas Institution plant. At one time, it was the largest consumer of electricity in the country. It's the largest shutdown in service, but it's a great place because of all the wiring that it's already needed there. It's a great place to put in new generating facilities. So again, that is really SMRs that are at least pretty versatile. Started on 6 capacity. And everything that we see announcement that it's a million megawatt, power generation facilities. the tariff that was created by AEP that says if you're going to ask for 4 or 500 megawatts of power to a site, you can commit to that for a period of time, up to 12 years. So we make sure the capital investment. The data set companies say yes, that's what's good for us. That's what they do. The bad thing about this is like power generation trend that's going on is that you have high control. HB15 is already mentioned. Part of what's in HB15 and you want to actually gain is that you put in an on-site generating facility, upgraded 50 megawatts, siting controls that are entirely modified siting board, and your local jurisdiction is the control. And so, if we need to consider the relationship between cells and the wood, Amazon came to the city planning and zoning commission to submit a request, and when they said they don't like all CO2 emissions was occurring, we think we're going to talk about some more business development in the line, and they just treated the application because they didn't think it was necessary. Okay, so natural gas is one in the lot. The natural gas law is very powerful at the state level. HB15, which we talked about, has a lot of advantages to the natural gas industry. We talked about carbon. One of the things that's good in HB15 is not only does the natural gas industry get this kind of advantage treatment through the bill, they also have reductions made to personal property tax, so that they save money on taxes as well. Permission, so here's the big thing. If you want to do power rights, that's all you're not. You've got a little piece of land, you have to go to markets, put bylaws on. Put it in the gas pipeline, it's good. You've got to dig trenches for miles and miles and miles. So how do you go about doing that? They figured that out. And that's what you use to do the road, license ways, to their possibility of hot. There happens to be movement right up to this site, they're going to put this solar on. And then us getting wireless and telecom businesses, developments, wireless, we now know that the company Sprint came into existence in Cincinnati, which was 7% railroad industry. That's 7% railroad and wireless, like railroad rights, it's like hundreds of miles and we're talking to the moon. So that's what's going to happen with natural gas. So we got a piece of property that's close to the railroads. It's a good place to play. Okay, so I mentioned that's all I'm going to do. It's active protection and financing. It's a mechanism enabling Ohio law that allows a city to say, we're going to take parcel and a fraction of the money in excess of the food development and redirect it back to building infrastructure. The TIP was originally created, and these are really all across the United States. The TIP was typically their tradition to try to promote the development of the ground. And so the government knows now the steel is glass. Ended up with mostly out over the steel mills and ground that had no infrastructure that were really kind of problem. The city itself did have money because it's major delivery tax source was gone. And so to encourage the development of the lands that will promise to reimburse the cost of putting in the infrastructure, will reimburse the property taxes that's going to be required when you sell it. So that's kind of what this flows as makes sense to me. We'll touch on this. And where does the money comes from these other agencies that are funded by property taxes? And so when I was on the school, I was just in the board that these are being cheap as residential developments. They're taking money away and shifting towards the school. there's also a background mechanism that says after the infrastructure, whatever reimbursement development, or whatever infrastructure, water systems, that kind of stuff. After that development, we reimburse it between the minimum of the cities to just keep going back to the schools and I can tell you our city they took to some absolutely this is all that was done for years and we used to in the city and the mayor response to that by the way, the school like we get these taxes all the time and we got to go close. Okay, probably all know about this property tax initiative that's going on. The reason that we know is we're against it. There hasn't been any mechanism proposed for what's going to replace it. So what kind of chaos but this is eliminated. There's already potential person property tax and all this stuff that goes into the developers. I mentioned to you the Republicans will push for property tax rates and be brought by 15 for the owners. It's got all these local governments that have on property taxes as their lead partnership. If you're trying to attract development, and it's a tool you can use to attract it. It's also a tool you can use to negotiate on when you try to get development and employment. What happens when there are more property taxes, and what happens when those slightly controls get to the power side and down the village law? Okay, so the last one. So if you decide that what happened, your city council decides what happened, what things should you think about. Here's the first one. This comes from an attorney from mine who's also a city council member. It says, make sure you get stuff more about the contract, like the economic development agreement, so that no matter what may happen with the law, the belief is that the terms that you negotiated with contract between two parties remains in force, even if they change some elements of the law and reduce it all. Requiring the convention to make sure that you get stuff in the agreement that talks about noise emissions, architectural standards, just for visual stuff. And then I'm pretty sure we're on the table or I think people would get a lot smarter about the deal. Make sure you get payments to improve taxes, not only in the schools, but also to townships, to the community. This is a big one. I went back and looked through our contracts all over. I went back through our contracts with between the school district and Amazon. And some of the warehouses address the fact that property taxes exist. So I'm not sure. I suggested to the school board that they would look and see if our taxes will survive in the nation's property taxes. Ask some of the citizens for us for one-time contributions and buy our school buses to $1 to improve the students. We're going to take the schools up when we have that construction stuff. We're going to make sure they contribute to that. This one, the company I worked for data centers in a number of locations, realizes wasting where data centers need to office complexes. There's been other places where the Spartan or places doing this they use the big data centers like the Amazon and other data centers that use it to heat the whole city. That's a big aspect of and then one of the township trustees raised this just the other night. I thought it was a great one. It said, insist that they take out surety bonds that will pay the cost of the remediation and demolition should they decide to bail out. Very much in agreement that the technology being used today to run facilities. I say it's like the steam locomotive and steam locomotives and railroad steam locomotives and rules and energy efficient. They're the best thing they had in 100 years and those they cut off energy consumption of industry trees now. I think that's about that with the infrastructure where some smart kids sitting here and trying to say, oh, here's actually we have to do this lawnmower efficiency in about half the city, so we just need to know updated. The key is you have to ask for that coverage. Once you give them the zoning annexations, all the amenities stuff, you have more leverage. You can ask for all the ones, we'll say that back, so you need to make sure you do those negotiations while they still need you. And then this is a perfect one of the NDAs. If you haven't run into it, there's a thing published by the Attorney General and a year or two ago. It's called the law. It's very useful for public officials. I think you would find some interest in it. It's the kind of plain language interpretations and I found this particular sentence on page 58 of that it was a sign on the agreements do not create trade secret status, or otherwise public disclosure documents. I won't go the rest of it. But the way these entities in a lot of discussions with the data center operators, I have to make requirements that they take advantage of the policy, the sunshine laws that says they can go into executive session with confidential documents associated with this. This particular decision that I did when this happened, this particular decision that's not true. I would encourage you that if there's anything going on in the community to apply to take whatever legal action is appropriate and see if we can use as judges to make case law that the entities do not allow in this kind of situation. That's what we've got. Thanks.
And Jordan is going to bring us home the testimony and the policy we have that as well here. But Jordan is going to be our last presenter of the day. So at this time, Jessica, I'm going to call you out as Jessica Baker. This is Kim Georgeton. You guys can come up. We're going to consolidate the last 45 minutes or so to ask me now, right? How can we become involved? What do we need to do? So Jordan's going to kick us off with that as well. Great information regarding what's coming next. And if you want to then we're going to go ahead and do like a Q&A session. So interactive, I'm just going to kick them out for a little bit. Tee up some questions that you guys may have. Stretch, I don't know about you guys, but I'm freezing at this point, so it's hot for me in here. The rail's cold. Oh my gosh, it's freezing. Okay, so you can see that stretch them out there too. So thank you guys. I'll go ahead and finish work.
Jordan Hayner is Democratic candidate in the Ohio House of Representatives, District 47 in Butler County, running with her experience as a mental health counselor, mom, and community advocate to the State House. A lifelong Ohioan, she has worked directly with young people and families, navigating trauma, addiction, and economic stress, shaping her commitment to fully funding public schools, expanding mental health services, and protecting families. Harriet has become increasingly engaged in local fights over unchecked data center growth in Southwest Ohio, raising concerns about transparency, utility costs, and long-term impacts on neighborhoods and farmland. She is working to ensure that the 47th District has a strong voice for accessible health care, fair wages, and economic development, and is accountable to the people who live and work in the community. Welcome, Jordan.
Thank you all. So the 47th District is up in Butler County, which includes Oxford, Hamilton, and Fairfield Township, with several proposed data centers all around Butler County right now. And so I'm excited to jump into politics as a mental health therapist for 13 years. Reading an article about a data center proposed in the city of Hamilton was the tipping point for me back in October. I was like, nah, this is the last step, this is my last job. So sent out an email very quickly,
and really was curious as to if I made a mistake, but here I am. And Dave said it was very much part of what brought me here. So in looking up at Trenton, right above us, we share an aquifer underneath the Great Atlantic River with Trenton. They've already broke ground for their massive facility. It's going to be the size of 5 super Walmarts, if that helps you picture a little bit. And so there's some things going on in that community. Hamilton's data center is currently paused. I'm very actually happy with how the Hamilton City Council managed that by putting a lot of guardrails into place, making the company take care of all the infrastructure, and in that feasibility, the financial feasibility study at the very beginning, the company was like, oh, this is going to take forever, it costs us way more money if you guys aren't going to help us. And they put a pause on it. So, yeah, we want that. Right? We want to slow things down. My other biggest concern of being in Hamilton itself, like in most of the towns along the river, industries are gone, right? We have these big old warehouses that have been sitting empty for decades, right? Hamilton has done such an amazing job recently revitalizing some of those spaces for community, for generating revenue, sweeping up. But it took a long time to figure out what to do with it, right? I worry about tech. We talked about the bubble bursting. We talked about tech moving on. What's going to happen when you have these buildings? Acres and acres of land. And then what? We're going to have to come up with new ideas on how to make these functioning spaces. That's going to be really problematic. I don't know why we need to bring that to it. And do that all the way. So there are a couple of bills that we had talked about. And throughout this time, we've all been kind of mentioning. So these are just, they're pretty. So we talked about NDAs. The specific House bill is House Bill 695. It includes county commissioners, trustees, village legislature, and village mayors. So it would prevent them from engaging in an NDA. It would result in fines if they were to do that, and anything in that NDA would be null and void. You might notice that the city council is not listed, and that's one of those things. That's also protecting that home rule for those cities and municipalities to be able to take care of those cities and their community. So there's a little difference in that. So public records transparency. So I think was kind of alluded to in this last thing. When you request public records for any of these developments, they are actually react quite a bit of things, right? And have things included like tax, water, vulnerabilities, or, as I like to say, it's secret. So those things can be redacted from public records, so they're still not transparent to us. That's really problematic. Speaking of transparency, you might have been reading stuff about Jobs Ohio this week, and kind of picking up in looking at transparency, what they're doing with the funding. It is supposed to be in tandem with these industries and these local economies. Only 25% I would say their money has actually created jobs in this course. So there's a lot of things going on. There's a recent controversy over antibiotic. They want to have their product not used for war and other mass surveillance of U.S. citizens. So they're pushing back on the government. And I think hopefully we'll continue to see more of that. Companies not going to use these things as mass surveillance. Senate Bill 2 is talking about increasing the grid. They want to actually make it easier and faster for these things to start to get off the ground. So there's actually a lot of push towards making it easier to start to work these things. Now, all the other bills here listed are things that actually will do slow things down, right? So the NDAs, we'll block those. We have HB 646, which is creating the data center study commission. And it's made up of several different kind of appointed people based on parties, based on the governor gets a couple of appointees, the Senate gets appointees, this commission is going to actually study the environmental impacts, the economic impacts. And this is a temporary commission. It's going to gather all the data for the next 6 months, hopefully this passes. And then they will actually dissolve. But they will release all of the results. So it's an interesting makeup. It would be it would be interesting with majority minority party what that would look like. But again, as we talked about today, this is such a bipartisan issue. And it's a place where we can all come together and sit at the table here and how we can use that for our communities. The last one is another big one going on right now is HB 706. That has also been talked about today a little bit. The minimum requirement on data centers, increases to ratepayers. They have to be 85% of what was paid out and minimum for power they're utilizing. So those are really basic requirements that actually should be given this long time ago. But here we are trying to do it now. These are things I learned about my community and why I got involved. So I'm not an expert by any means. I'm much like any of you out here, just trying to know what's going on locally, getting to get into these things that can really make a difference in our life. I didn't know how important our state house was for so many things in our neighborhoods, right? So I'm with you guys. I'm going to listen, I want to understand what my community members want. I think, we need to convert particularly on this issue. This issue also leads into many other issues. So they're very connected. The gentleman down here was on the school board, touched on schools a little bit. For the data center in Trenton, the company has offered to do to give to the public schools every year. I think it's $400, which is great for any struggling school district. That just sounds amazing. Do you know how many struggling school districts there are right now? A lot. So there ends up being the relative, right? That's enticing for a community to get that money for education. They get that money for education, and then the state doesn't have to give them that amount of money anymore. The state saves more money, and they don't fully fund the public education resources. So this is all very much intertwined. Then we have property tax, things get complicated. So these are just kind of the ones that are much more going to continue to come up. Other bills that we talk about. The last one was the freshwater water. Greater Cost Responsibility Act, Data Center Tax Break Bill. That's the one we're going to take away, that tax break for all the sales tax and items that are in the building. So they really want to do something about that, which would be, Powering Ohio Communities Act. This would require the data centers approval to invest in local communities. Back at the Trenton presentation, that was a very important, whether it was the schools or whether they were going to create job programs in the schools as well. That was the big thing was really the schools not take it over. The Local Development Protection Act. Again, that's more about the whole government society they want there. So there's a couple of those absolutely coming up as well. Data centers and blind access is a tipping point, but man, this is going to affect everywhere. So one of the best things that I encourage anybody to do, find out who your state represents. Talk to them. They're the ones making this decision. We still got how many months until the election, right? Some things are going to be decided this year, and we need to get on top of it. We need to talk to those people that maybe we don't even know or never see. And really tell them what's wrong in these communities. Show up these things, love your friends, educate people on the stuff that's really important right now, because there's so much going around that it isn't true, misinformation. So more of these community events are definitely needed. So most importantly, vote. Your voice matters. Your voice matters. Yeah. Thank you all.
And thank you to all of our panel experts as well. I don't think that you're ever going to have any time in Ohio history the amount of subject matter experts in one room at the same time. So I want to thank you guys enough. This is such an important topic, and I'm very appreciative of you guys taking a break. Facilitate this conversation as well. So we're going to go to this section and we're going to do like a Q&A and a community session, right? What can we now do? So when I was first facing this question, first and foremost, I didn't even know how to go to a council meeting. Where are they at? Where are they housed? Who are the players, right? How do you do a successful FOIA request for your information? I did not even know what to get one, right? 47 years old, I had no clue what any of that was. So now is the part that we have to become active, right? We just received a wealth of information about what data centers are. My questions that I have is how do we keep that, right? I don't think e-commerce is going away, I don't think social media is going away. I personally want to see a balanced approach, but I do not want, in my personal opinion, no one can vary, but I do not want these hyperscale data centers that are going to impact not only the health, our environment, and generations to come. So now, right, now that we have this information, tools, I would tips, and we'll post this presentation as well, so that you can go back and read if you have any questions. Now is your time to ask what we need to do to get involved. So I've got a few experts up here too. If you guys want to put your chairs over here, guys, please feel free to stand up. I'm even frozen at this point. It's hot when we're standing down in the hospital. But Caitlin, would you go to the hi. She's gonna be running around. My name is Lisa, and I have to take off. I'm constantly down. I know you're great. What rights do I have? What constitutional protections do I have? I listened to Georgia. She's a phenomenal information regarding constitutional law. I wrote a lot of Jessica, you're small, you're a little crazy, but we all start that you're very mighty, right? So we started a whole petition at us to as well about what we can do to just put a petition or stop a moratorium on the ballot. In certain communities, those are moratoriums that are in effect. So my biggest question is, now what? Now that we have a pause, what do we need to do to continue this pause, right? What is the next steps? Is it organizing an organization, getting community members together? Is it petitioning more? Is it learning more about the laws? Is it asking our representatives to get involved? I honestly, I don't know. That's why we put this together today with the University of Cincinnati. So these are one of the questions that I personally have. Please feel free to raise your hand, come up if you want to as well, ask any questions that you have. Can I propose the first question? Constitutional law, like Jessica and a group of individuals literally went to 2 counties and put together a petition to get it onto the Ohio ballot, right? So once we receive, in fact, I'm going to let Jessica speak to this real quick. She's like, oh my goodness. But then I got a question for Kim as well, like constitutional appeal.
So we're lucky because in Ohio, we as citizens can present a law to be changed or amended. Indiana and Kentucky cannot, I didn't know that. But so 2 attorneys are working very hard. They did our language for us, and we got the first part of the petition. And between Adams, Brown, and 16 other counties, I believe, we pulled in the 1,000 that's needed. We actually collected 1822 in 8 days. And but they, so we have a team called around to some of the counties that's received them from the Board of Elections, and we know that we have 1,000 signatures. Last count, just after that, was 11.6.
to like him, because I'll really pass this microphone down to you guys. Is that the best way for us to fight it? Do we fight it on Ohio constitutional law that all lawyers here too? So feel free to weigh in on the
Yeah, great. So just a caveat, I am actually not an attorney. I don't want to be an attorney because actually you as citizens have more power to actually redress your grievances with the government than anything you do. So this document right here is the Ohio Constitution, and I'll just read from it directly. If you all don't have a copy, you should get one. You can actually order it directly from the Secretary of State's website. Article 1, the Bill of Rights. It's your inalienable rights. All men are by nature free and independent and have certain inalienable rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending your life, liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting your property, and seeking and obtaining happiness and safety. So if something that the government is proposing is contradicting that, you actually have standing to complain about it, like officially complain about it under that Bill of Rights. You can actually cite this Article 1, Section 1 as one of your initial points on whatever letter you're creating. Article 1, Section 2, all political power is inherent in the people. That's you. You have right and you have standing to, again, list this in your letter. If you create the letter, you can actually just copy and paste it and say, in this way, the power is here with the people, not with the government. You also obviously have the right to assemble and redress your grievances with the government. This is Article 1, Section 3. You do not need to go to your state representative. You do not need to go to your town council member. You can create your own letter and you can stand on your own and demand that your rights are respected. Another important section is Article 1, Section 14. Page here. And this is the right for you to be secure in yourself, in your house, with your papers, with your possessions, and that any unreasonable searches or seizures shall not be violated. No warrant shall be issued unless there is probable cause. So this particular section, and it's Article 1, Section 14, what it says is that these data centers, what are they gathering? Gathering data about you, and that information may not be accessed by anyone else. If it is, then you have a complaint under Article 1, Section 14 of the Ohio Constitution of a constitutional violation that is being perpetrated against you. And you can again do this in whatever letter you're creating, just copy and paste this, and then below you can say, this is how this is violating my rights. I believe that we all have the right to do this, that we can as a body of people. We have a civil complaint that's going on here against our constitutional rights, and we can come together as a group of people, and we can exercise that. Section 19 is the last section that I'll mention. That is Article 1, Section 19. This is regarding your water rights. Okay, so if any of you live on acreage and there's a well on your property, or there is groundwater on your property, Article 1, Section 19 protects your right to exercise your rights of ownership of that water. So if your groundwater becomes contaminated because of said data centers, you have again been constitutionally violated in the fact that not only did your village council or your township people approve it, people at John's Ohio sold it, and then the attorney firm, whatever it was, or a or in between, all of those people in that chain of abuse are responsible for violating your constitutional rights. So what I would like to do is inspire and encourage people today to understand what your rights are, to stand constitutionally for those. Again, if you don't need representation, you actually have more power as the people versus having representation fighting off of Ohio rights from. You can fight directly off of your own constitutional violations. Again, I'm not an attorney, but I have done this. I did it in Trenton when they tried to prohibit people from speaking outside of the city limits. I sent them a letter, I cited all the constitutional issues with it, and the moment we logged in, they changed their decision on it. So the problem is a lot of our elected officials don't even have a copy of this, they don't even know what's in here. Okay, and you have strong rights to be able to demand your redress of those grievances. Another issue that we've seen is with emergency, quote-unquote, emergency zoning changes. Okay, they can't do that.
emergency zoning changes, that there's no emergency for them to cite. So if they have no reasoning listed for an emergency zoning change, they have nothing to stand on, and you have everything to stand on. So bring that to them as well. You need to construct these letters from yourself and where list where you have been harmed based upon your constitutional rights. You also have a federal constitution behind you as well. If it ever goes to the Supreme Court, there are cases that will support these kinds of complaints. So I would just encourage you to get copies of these, to study and know your constitution. I think that we as a people have been, I will include myself in this because I'm not going to, point my finger at anyone here, but I'm just going to say that we as a people have been lax on understanding what our rights actually are. And unfortunately, we're in a situation now where our government is subverting our rights. The people that we depend on at the state level, at the federal level, we're seeing this constantly. They are subverting our rights. And if we don't learn how to stand up and use them, our Constitution will be gone before you know it. So it's a matter of putting it into practice. And, again, I have people reaching out to me all over the state of Ohio asking for, do you have some suggested language on this? Is there a template for this? I'm happy to share any and all ideas. This is an educational experience, but again, I just want to say that this is not legal advice. I'm not an attorney, and however, I'm more than willing to happy to help anyone with language or, suggested ideas on how to move forward and holding these folks accountable, because it's about time that we hold them accountable. So thank you.
Raise hands, you and I will come around. Lead this with a little lead. I'm going to lead us up with you guys. Can you share it to you?
Okay, so I got to stand and tell you hi.
That's very cool.
Hello, my students. Okay, I'm students together. Twin Waters, which is a 501c3 that tries to eliminate and educate on water issues. And I'm concerned not only for the water, given what our EPA, Ohio EPA say, hey, water quality, hey, come down, just, so we can get rid of this water basin. So I applaud advocacy for biologists. All right, secondly, I am telling you, if you know how to do it, go online and sign up for the Ohio EPA notices, especially air quality. Lyman has a meeting, Hillary has a meeting, they're putting in 57 generators in diesel and gas. So you need to be aware of that your air quality is going to go down. So, one of my questions is, okay, with EPA the Ohio EPA trying to decrease our water quality, what can we do to make it known we are dismayed, disgruntled, and angry? Thank you. Might as well go to Nathan first, and then I guess we'll go to Lindsay.
I'm sure we all ask for sure. But thank you for bringing that up, thank you for being here. I think it is incredibly important to understand that we have a lot more power than we know, especially when it comes to government decisions like this. So the Ohio EPA, what they've done is they've put out a potential rule. They have to do that instead of just making a decision because they have to accept feedback from the community. And that's why OEC did submit testimony, we submitted a comment opposing that proposed rule. But the reality is that the Ohio EPA is a direct function of the Ohio Governor's Administration and the decisions that the governor and his directors make. And so at the end of the day, the Ohio EPA is going to have to respond to political pressure. But the Ohio EPA can only do even then so much within the realm that they were given by the State House. One thing that I disagree that sort of come on is that it doesn't affect, it's not that the right strongly suggest that if you want to make it so that the Ohio EPA can't create a rule or an exemption that allows data centers to discharge, if you want to create a law that says data centers have to use sanitary sewer systems, so they have to use certain practices like closed loop water systems to preserve water, those are decisions that are fundamentally made at the state house by state senators and state representatives, and they can constrain and direct the Ohio EPA. That's where your time is all spent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that really highlights the importance of public participation and the fact that you're all here today and there's all these efforts going on. As I mentioned earlier, I think we are maybe trending up. Like I'm trying to be glass half full here. Something I forgot to highlight. So we've talked a few times about the sales tax exemption that's been going on for 13 years. There was a bill that was mentioned to get rid of that. You mentioned that just a minute ago. The bill actually passed the legislature and then was vetoed by Governor Clark. So, Spencer just mentioned the administration, that's another sticking point. However, the leadership in both the House and the Senate said they're going to try to bring it back with a majority. So, that gives me some hope that the legislature is paying attention, that they are thinking about these things. This study commission is going to be very important, and you all are going to be helping inform it, right? And participate in whatever comment periods or other things that we do. And we often place a lot of importance on organizations like the Sierra Club, and always see others on formal comment periods, right? Because that's what they like on record. Which then can be used in litigation, things like that. They're very important. You can contact these people at any time. We should be doing it all the time because they need to hear from you constantly about these issues. And so today's a good step in the right direction. There's a lot of opportunities for engagement coming up. I'm excited to hear about the ballot measure potentially. That's going to be on a lot of people's radar as well. So yeah, I think we're trending up. There's a lot of headwinds against this, but as long as we want people together, we're really making a difference here.
But I just want to clarify, I did not mean to say that it is not a good idea to speak to your state reps. I do think that's a very good idea as well, so please don't take it that way. What I meant was, this is an emergency situation, and your state reps and senators, whatever laws they're trying to put in place, it's going to take them a couple of years. They have to get the legislation, they introduce it, it's through the House and the Senate, and then the governor has to sign it. All of these things in the chain are not going to help you today. So the suggestions that I have for you regarding stepping up for yourself, addressing the grievances with the government, that is what you can do right now, in addition to working along the lines with your state reps and other organizations that these guys are representing to help you develop laws that will protect you in the long term. But like I have been in situations where there's a lot of legislation that we want to see passed, and it also gets barred from being passed. So unless the Speaker of the House brings the legislation up for a vote, you're going to be waiting a long time before the conservative legislation gets passed. Most specifically because these data center projects are being supported and pushed by very big lobbies who have a lot of money. So that is inherently a problem that I feel we're seeing currently right now with what's getting reached out to us unbeknownst.
Thanking City Council for their study of environmental impact.
I am Ms. Marissa Ballard, and I'm a representative from Wilmington residents for responsible development. And I wanted to ask about some of the legality issues regarding the EPA's non-disclosure agreements that are happening in our various councils and our various small towns. And, in our case, we didn't know until Amazon already purchased, and then for 2 years we've seen that our zoning in our various codes and in small town legislative features were being changed unbeknownst to us on behalf of Amazon. And so in this not unique situation, I know there's other towns similarly sort of past the tipping point for at least one bill. I know Paul Davis mentioned that she filed a suit. maybe more misinformation. I think that some of the powers, even above our local council, are also at play here. And we're all learning this. Somebody said the last 12 weeks. I forget who that was from what location, but that's about the same for us. We've had about 2.5 months to learn a lot about our local government, our bigger government, and then also all the data center information. It's a really big question, I guess. So, what would you recommend at this point? Let's respect our local government, but still addressing the issue where the Amazon say they want to build to be 0.3 miles from the elementary school and about 200 feet from new buildings, new residential homes. Thank you.
Questions? Yes, please feel free to get up. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Let's just ask questions. I have a slightly unique ideas. I think there are other options, and we should never do them. But I think there's a bigger problem, which is that there's nothing compelling the local officials to actually tell you what's going on, whether they've signed anything or not. Our proposal, different state, but the same sort of thing. Our proposal, they worked on for over a year, no NDAs, but they just didn't say no. They didn't say we're thinking about doing this. They didn't say what is the community thing. And then the proposal hits, and the process takes 6 weeks to approval because they're treating it like it's a detached garage. I think you have to pressure your local officials to say, if you have one of these, perhaps what you need at the local level is some sort of ordinance that says that over a certain size proposal, there's a cooling off period where they have to present it to the public and give you at least 3 or 4 months to respond rather than this race through process of just, treat it like a little zoning change. Without that, there's a way for them to jam down the throats if they're inclined to do it. And so don't rest on the hope that an NDA prohibition solves the problems.
Pick up my iPad the way I didn't want to, so that's okay, but that's okay. But we provide slides. Are we getting any? Come over here.
Thank you for the question. I think it's an important one. So a few things. I think it's important for all of us not just understand that, by the letter of the law per se, but also the practicality and practice. The Ohio Supreme Court is currently a 6-1 majority. It has consistently over the last few years ruled in favor of corporations over individuals, a number of ways, regulatory restrictions. It also has ruled numerous times to weaken sunshine laws in our state, and so there is the practicality of it is a little different than what's written in the law. That being said, House Bill 695 is currently in the Ohio House. It's already received one House floor on a 93-0 vote. So I know it's disagree to say that legislation can be passed if it can when there's a political appetite for it. And that's really the most important thing here to understand is that there were maybe one or two, really data center focused pieces of legislation in the State House between January 2025 and December 2025. There have been like 15 between January and where we are now, 2026. And that's not because everybody just woke up one day and said, oh, I really care about data centers. I think I'm right now. It's because they have been getting calls and calls and calls, and they're seeing when people are showing up to the town halls in their communities, they're hearing from their constituents, they're hearing from Republicans and Democrats and rural voters and suburban voters and urban voters. They're hearing from people who are about water and energy and costs and air pollution and all the above. So this political pressure has already created movement at the State House, bipartisan movement at the State House. Now we need even more pressure to get those things passed, to make those bills better, and to make sure that we can get that into law as soon as possible.
If you're looking for your next survey, how areas exist in these instances of other sacrifice and cracking stuff, if you can find a Saudi environment that you work with, I mean, these companies because they're rushing through making mistakes. So if you can find someone who's really knowledgeable of the processes for zoning or siting or something, if you have a Saudi environment, maybe they can find a mistake in developers made or a mistake that county commissioners do, whatever it is. And if you're really far behind the process, that's probably the best bet.
Just real quick again on House Bill 695, Adam is the one who put that forward. And that's a great step in the right direction, but the penalty, if you sign it in days, is only $1,000. So if these companies are willing to spend billions of dollars, they're not going to care about spending an extra $1,000 to protect somebody to sign an NDA. So it is possible you might still run into people who are trying to sign an NDA, but it is also the law in Iowa, the sunshine laws permit you to get that information. So the first thing you have to do is find out if somebody signed an NDA. So Lisa and I went to our township meeting and we did a preemptive petition with them. We said, hey, if you're signing NDAs, we need to know about it. And we had a conversation with our officials and they said, we tell you right now, we have not signed NDAs. So part of it is starting that conversation early enough in advance, which goes back to the donors that this is not a spectator sport. And, as I mentioned also earlier, there's a lot of lobbies who are trying to get their corporate objectives achieved. And the only way to stop that is to be involved. So having those conversations, doing a preemptive petition with the leadership of your council or wherever they are in the county, that's the first step in making sure that conversation is happening before it happens to you.
You said political motivation, is that what you said? Sir? Political appetite. Yeah. Would that also include monetary gain as well?
I'm not entirely sure exactly, but let's be honest, these data center companies, people who build these data centers are part of these massive corporations, like Amazon, Google, Meta, others, who do make significant contributions to their apps to candidates across the state of Ohio. There are also other areas, right? I think there recently the Building Trades Association, IBW, the International electric workers, there is going to be production. But for them, this is a massive opportunity for their members to have really good paying jobs in the state. And I'm not going to say to an IBW member, you don't get to have a good paying job. We're going to stand away at 100% for the benefit of being able to just draw a line and say, rather than say they need to be able to compensate fairly for the things that they're using, the impact we have, we research, we science, we responsibly. So, there are people with other vested interests like building trades and who are also,
the constituents that people serve. So if they know that you're mad, no matter how much mad they want to run you, they're still going to act as best as they're supposed to act.
Hi, I'm Liz Zimmer. I'm in the state of Ohio Parks. I live in Westchester. And if we can just talk about the quality of life issues that data centers pose. Primarily, we know that these data centers really get their energy from fracked natural gas, likely from our state carbon plants. So here's a question. Do you think it would be effective for these communities that are considering data centers to require in their community agreements mandatory testing of air and water before operations occur, periodically afterward, and to require also mitigation against the increased cancers and respiratory diseases, and probably waterborne illnesses that will occur. Thank you.
I'll say that, go ahead.
There's a delay. There's a delay.
So, hi, that was great. So, one thing that's important to know is we touched on already, we've covered a lot of these topics, and you're right, but these projects still need permits, right? From entities like the Ohio Protection Agency for water discharges, right? They need air quality permits that they can get at. They need, the correct zoning permits, et cetera. Now, we've seen the legislation, we've seen the administrative agencies, we've seen local governments trying to weaken some of these permitting pathways, and so that's not solely bullying. But the point is, they still often do need to achieve these things before they can be operational. Theoretically, those permits should be conditioned on mitigation, remediation, ensuring that the discharge is not going to violate water quality standards, et cetera. And so, that's part of the participation. It's not just that the state legislature is talking to the permitting agencies in your local government to ensure that they're on top of it, participating in those conversations like we mentioned earlier to ensure that they're doing it right. And if they're not, then that's like area to step in and say, you got to put the laws on this until you've done it correctly. So I think that granular level of participation is going to be particularly beneficial.
Yeah, and I'll also say that we're talking about big tech in this example, but something I've realized over the last year researching this is that big tech use big oil and natural gas reservoirs to provide power to these facilities. Just as importantly, big oil and big gas need big tech to increase the demand of energy. And so we're not just fighting against one. So you're totally right, all those things need to be done, but we're not just fighting against big tech when it comes to that. It's also energy. And I wish no one of the politicians working for our best interests, but a lot of money is being thrown out around there, and so a lot of the pathways in which you would normally approach this issue on the EPA, they're not necessarily outlined. And that's something that needs to be, we need to know that going into it, because if we take our good faith that their organizations work on our behalf, and they're not, then we have to make our face the end of the day, not that.
Just one last comment. As I mentioned in the slides, we have a number, we still have coverage. That point, we're coming to the local government, and there's something that needs to get permitted. Whatever approvals might be planning in this one. That's when you get coverage. And that's a great. And so, if you want to do architecture, if you want those restrictions, if you want whatever all the restrictions, ask for that. What source of that is never really right. And so, going inviting these guys in, they ask us
you as well. So I have created a strategic advisory document that has a lot of ideas in it. It's a brainstorm essentially of different things that would be required to be put into these contracts in advance so that it would cover and care for the health. I'm happy to share that with you if you want to reach out to me.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about political solutions to this over here. Political solutions to this, but what I haven't heard at all about is how do we make our communities unpalatable with corporations?
Well, also, all those things that I mentioned, asking for someone to stop the campus.
Yeah, get your zoning right. You can use your zoning to make them go away.
Well, first of all, this zoning's not really an option, sorry.
No. We passed our zoning illegally. That's my question.
Well,
What's the Cadillac resource for zoning?
so zoning can always be changed to legislation. That's the prescription right here is you need to proactively design your zone districts to either condition or exclude data centers. The problem with that is, as Darlene mentioned, there's an application already pipeline and zone changing won't make a difference in the invested.
Right, so at that point, what can people do, the citizens of a particular community do to make that community unpalatable to corporations? And protest and decide what?
I don't have a good answer to that question, but to the first question, we work with Finishing Environmental Services, and they have model zoning ordinances and other resources on their website, and they've also been very responsive to local communities with helping them kind of revisit the zoning regulations and helping them firm them up, which is why the moratoriums in the short term can be really effective to give you time to be able to establish those protections and be proactive about it.
Could you repeat the resource?
Finishing Environmental Legal Services.
If I could just say too, I won't speak to specifically like maybe my roles and it's just a little bit wrong. But one thing that you can do is incorporate data centers into building performance standards in your city. So your city, many cities already have building performance standards, or if they don't, they can create them. Let's say certain industries, certain employees or square feet have to follow certain standards for emissions and water use, etc. And that is what allows them to maintain certain tax abatements or things like that. One conversation happening in the city of Columbus, for example, is including data centers into the building performance standards of major industrial sites. That would be a big boost in helping us require them to do certain assessments and make sure that they have to stay under certain emissions levels.
Yeah, real quick, Deerfield Township, they went ahead and they passed a moratorium on any data center conversations before any data center conversations are going to occur there. They did that proactively, so you need to get people who are inside of the village council or township trustee members to preempt that and do a moratorium before the conversation starts, like, if you can. So it depends, to make it more palatable, I think it depends on at which stage you are in the process. So there are probably different things you can do that you get on during each stage, but if you get at the beginning, you can get your council or township trustees to preempt that with a flat out ban or moratorium, and that's your best bet.
Thank you. Mr. Pass, yeah, sure.
You have to know what's stuff on the sign, or the roots. Which means you have to pay attention to what the council's doing.
So basically, overload with bureaucracy, this is what you're saying.
No, I'm saying keep asking yourself what to say, okay.
This is a little bit behind the side pass. But if we're talking about smaller communities in particular, we learned earlier about how these data centers have certain needs, right? And so they want to know where they have access to water and grid and land. So if you have a smaller community, you could probably look at that and see where potential sites might be to put a data center. Then you can go after it and try to tie that land up somewhere, whether it's by some sort of zoning mechanism, which makes it very difficult to develop in a certain way, or use the mechanism that we've used in conservation field for decades, which is by land. I realize this is a huge lift that I'm talking about. This is not an easy thing to do, but that's the investment we can do in any land use controversy is control and possibly can. And that's another way, I guess, just to mention on that a little bit, to find out what might be coming down the pipeline, who owns the land, or who is it being shot down to, and if some of these companies already own it, well, that's a red flag. If it's for sale, find out whether or not it's going to buy it, find out what the rumor wants, et cetera, et cetera. That is an extra governmental way of operating on it.
Is there a way to make things harder for the electrical companies?
We can always look at that.
It's harder to power these places. Any impediment?
So it is a double-edged sword, because you have the potential for climate generation, right? So what the most efficient way for these data centers to power themselves is plug it directly to the grid. And in their perfect world, they just pay for how much energy they use out of the grid, and they don't worry about the increased costs on all of us as consumers, the increased cost of transmission infrastructure that needs to be built out for that massive amount of power. They just want to be able to plug it in. They're going to afford that by doing this behind the generation, behind the meter generation, which just basically means instead of plugging into the grid, they are creating power generation on their own site. So that's where we're getting these natural gas plants that are being built next to data centers to power the data center. If we do what you were suggesting, which is making it more difficult for them to plug into the grid, I don't believe that's going to stop them from doing the data centers. It's just going to make it more advantageous for them to continue to build behind the meter generation, specifically natural gas, small scale nuclear, and that behind the meter generation is limited in its regulatory oversight from organizations like UCL or OPSB, so it might even be less environmentally friendly than if they were to connect to the grid. I think in our world, they do connect it to the grid, but they do so while paying a massive tariff to pay for all the infrastructure improvements, all the transition improvements, all of the increasing demand that is going to increase costs, and ideally, they're doing so with renewable energy so that we're not increasing our emissions and pollution while we are allowing them to power those plants.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Terry Burchett, right here. I'm from Lawyer, Ohio. I'm not pretty well today. I want to thank all of you for giving your time this afternoon and sharing your information. I am more overwhelmed than I was right now, but I also have some resources now that I did not have before. But what I'm going to do is I basically drew the old ticket, and I'm in the spot where Paul was talking about it, where EWS is trying out the natural gas fuel cell 73 megawatt facility that will be the largest in North America. Is my neighbor. I'm less than 0.4, probably just basically about the streets away from it. And it terrifies me because I actually had a chance to sit in on the public hearing, and I have this wonderful thing that's the draft. This virtual
You can email it to me. I can look at it. I'll give you a call right now.
You guys, real quick, it is at 4 o'clock right now, so I would be cognizant of everyone's time. If the panelists are fine staying, you guys are fine staying too, please ask questions. Just want to tell everyone thank you if you need to leave at our staff force. So thank you. And if there's any questions.
So I actually don't have a question. I have a strong recommendation, and I've been speaking to Brent's homes out a lot and say what I want to say. So I'm here as a long-time community organizer, and I'm also a frontline storyteller. I mostly focus on community impacts of incredibly greater fossil fuel extraction, production, and transport. And I've also been to East Palestine 3 times, and the first time I went was on the 2nd anniversary last year, where I went to the creek with a resident and found active contamination. And the reason why I do that is because it's just so important to not only tell these stories, but also, because they need to be told, but the people who share them, they feel very alone. And that makes me very sad, because what happens to them often goes unnoticed and without recourse. And so being an on-the-ground organizer in towns where there's active data center construction, now I know what the impact is to the residents who live near it. And so basically my tagline of this issue at this point is that data center construction is the most cruel thing a city can do to its residents. And so I can't overstate the importance of how much residents who are being directly impacted by this construction need to have a seat at the table in these discussions, not only so their stories are being shared, but also so they can hopefully help to shape policy, because data center legislation with protections for residents really needs to be a priority. I'm sorry. I had more stuff I wanted to say, but honestly, I did that since like 3 in the morning. And my brain was kind of shut down, but yeah, I just want to just reiterate how important it is. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say, that we often talk about the economic and the environmental impacts of these projects, but the resident impacts who live near the construction are often overlooked, and that needs to be just as important an issue.
Hi, Amy. I just wanted to ask, so those that have worked with data centers before, have you ever seen those real the reports of water and air quality afterward? And that's one thing we've asked. Please make sure that we get this. But what I'm concerned is that what we'll get is their internal studies and not like independent studies. So that's a big concern.
I was talking a little bit about permits. I was mentioning earlier that permits under various laws, and that's where that information is going to be generated in the dip. So if they have a permit under the Water Act, for example, to discharge water, on that discharge on an annual basis, you can look at those discharge reports and find out what's going on, if you're exceeding limits and not meeting force limits, for example. And so with that, to answer your question really directly, that data should be generated, and you, as a citizen, through public records requests, should be able to get that data. Now, a lot of times you can use and stuff like that, but there should be, if you write it out, you need permission. So it's definitely going to be through whoever has done the work. And unfortunately, there's probably run into an alphabet soup of different agencies with the local and state level that are doing that. That's where engaging with folks that have done it before is often helpful. But you're not going to get information directly from the company unless it's through a publicly reported permitted report, essentially.
Hello. I
That's our understanding.
For defining from a conditional use.
Yes. Okay. So, in farming communities, it was a four-letter word up until this change of life. So, the fact that it was been on the ground when I suggested it was very encouraging. And now we are in the process of building plans, zoning committee together, getting the plans and doing all that. Wanting to preserve the agriculture, also wanting to be able to have family members come back and live on the farms. Is zoning flexible enough for us to put something in place to keep out data centers, but to still be able to have some flexibility in government as far as what we do want to do with it?
So the zone district under the comprehensive plan has to have a set of listed primary uses. And the use of the property is restricted to what's on the access. And that's the secondary facilities as well. You have a farm and without farm, for example. But if your zone is to spell out what those uses may not be, then you can write that as an area that you want to. Now, there's always but there is great power in zoning laws, so long as they are in place when applications are submitted and things like that. That's very useful to have your community. It sounds like you're all on the right track.
Thank you. So far, no one, they don't really leaves. So I think if we are efficient, we can keep them to the table. So, thank you.
I was just wondering, did you want to say something?
Thank you. So when I mentioned, the number of occasions where conservation easements have been placed on the process. So that's an act, as I understand it, the property rights there. It's really in the cases I know, it's something where actually the community, local government would require the government of money and just like the circle of provide a farm for the policy conservation easement in place. And then also, we don't have to make some.
The one word with that is a very conservation easement, you have always. Basically, what they're doing is restricting the way that they can be used in the future by deed, right? One word with these easements, though, is that they often always have to be and I've seen instances around here where the property owner, once they put the land into a conservation easement, they've got a land trust that lines up to pay for that easement in perpetuity, and the local government said, no, we'd rather something else happen to that property in 20 years. So you still need to have the electeds on board, even when there's sort of private property which is frustrating. It's necessary.
Yeah, just to be clear, we can definitely reclassify permissible uses. We do maybe classify it, heavy industrial zone, or you can explicitly exclude agriculture, A1, A2, or EFU zone, so you can actually specify what's excluded from data center usage. There's also a category called exclusive farm use overlays, so you can adopt or strengthen those preservation overlays. And then there's also an option to require a more feasible alternative findings for energy zoning, requiring those applicants to demonstrate an independent analysis that suitable industrial zone parcels exist within a defined radius. And so we already mentioned additional use permits. So that's what I have.
Example that's something I look forward to, and I can remember many conversations where we have a large conservation
I just wanted to say thank you for all of those specific ways we can advocate. We're from Adams County, and we've been fighting for about a month. It's been exhausting. None of us asked for this, and the corruption is absolutely disgusting. Nobody wants the data center, and everybody is realizing now after a month of back and forth about do we want it, don't we want it. No information from any of our elected officials. We have all come to understand that our local government is really the biggest issue right now. We have to get them out of office or move. We have to stay the course. When we get our big petition back from state, everybody in Ohio needs to sign it. So we have to all, every person in this room, network right now, and find scores of people in your life that you know, make sure they're registered voters, so that you can get on board and help with the petition. And that's going to be the way that we can all battle this. And I know people are scared, the gentleman down here. He's where we were about a month ago. You just feel like you're going up against a monster. I want to make a suggestion inside the commissioner meetings when they rattle off a number and you don't know what that code is. Just say, hold on a second, what was that code? Will you just give me a minute, please? Google it. They'll get mad, but that's okay. Because many of us probably never heard of a moratorium until this month. And you are going to have corrupt officials for whatever reason. They're going to stand in your way. Just remember to stay the course and stand united with your community. All right? When you have disagreements, say yes. We have to have this difficult conversation. I understand. I hear what you're saying. And don't get into arguments. Just try to move forward as positively as possible and know that everybody in Ohio, along New York and in Appalachia is fighting this fight right now.
We're going to take one last question from Barry, and as we're starting to wrap things up, please feel free to grab your info. There's a link tree to it. I can tell you a lot than I can, but what it does is it directs you to your community pages. So you guys are with us. Obviously, there's 17 different communities represented today. We cannot thank you guys enough for coming out. In the next week, after you all congregate and then today, we're going to start working with that link tree. So if you want to get information to your specific community, you can find it over our Facebook post, or Facebook page, or website, and whatnot. That post info will take you to that link tree as well. So very few. Wrap up your last question. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I have to go back to Columbus, so thank you so much for having us. Feel free to reach out anytime, but thank you so much.
Yeah, I see. Thank you. Real quick, if you all presenters are certainly too, can we give one round of applause for our greatly appreciated. Okay.
Very relationship was environmental resistance. I appreciate each and every one of your companies. Some of you have very personally or have talked to them. So I do appreciate it. The question I have is, I'm trying to do away with the is, we're having a situation where our city's hiding behind executive session. Is that something legal, or is that something that they're doing that's illegal, we can fight that out?
So there's all this community rules around how and go to an executive session. That can be for certain topics, usually like discussion, pending litigation or personnel matters to improve popular topics for executive session. But the thing that it also has to be done is if an entity goes into that session, they must report out on what was talked about. They don't have to talk about details, but they must tell you what they were talking about in that executive session. I don't know if that helps.
Because we're not getting information from it all. What they do is they say, we don't have to tell you that this is
Right, I don't know what to do with them.
My question would be is like, the students around, do they have like an office? You know, I know they're not, they don't have an office, but does their department have an office where we can just like donate that water to their office space?
I don't know. Yeah, probably Caitlin would probably know. Yeah, I would say.
What else do we need to do to clean up?
I think. See, the thing is that like I feel like janitorial staff will be pretty happy with how we left. Right. Okay. Hopefully this stream worked. Okay. I know that there were some audio issues, so.
Fingers crossed.
I know, right? That's all we can do.